Check, check.
Check. What? Hold on. How about now? Can you hear me now? You can hear me now, right? Yeah. I can't keep it like that though. I'll have to figure out. All right, let's do it again. Welcome to the first and last episode of Inside What Are the Odds with Barnes and Baris. Barnes will join us in about, let's give him 10 minutes or so. He had an overseas interview that he had to conduct, and he should be done pretty soon. Myself, same thing, but mine is after. So we'll go as long as we can, because we're probably going to go over. We'll give you our final predictions, of course. I will show you some of the final polling. Locals, I owe you North Carolina still. I'm trying to recap everything I said here. And you'll see what the finals are, what it looks like in Pennsylvania with nobody undecided. All right. And then we'll go from there. All right. So, and then we'll also talk about some of the problems that we saw in the polling in the final week. And unfortunately, you know, there's some people out there who just, let me put it this way. Instead of criticizing, I'm going to go ahead and give Nate Cohen a, whatever, slap on the back, thumbs up. He wrote what is true when everyone else isn't, and is trying to pass these numbers off as solid, when I think, it's fair to say that there's a potential for a very big miss. And he's right. There has been a significant decline in especially white Republicans, but certain whites overall in certain places. And I think I know why that is, or at least I don't know for sure. But my running hypothesis is that more Republicans voted early this year, and behaviorally, they're already tough and they're already different. And that once they voted, many of them, they just tuned it out. They're done. They don't want to take polls. They're done. All right. And then black participation and white Democratic participation increased significantly. Show you the finals, show you Pennsylvania. Like I said, I owe you North Carolina. And I did say this when it was muted. Interestingly enough, there are, what are you talking about? Oh, everyone else is hearing fine. Elon, you're always my test, right? Well, people are saying they agree with me. So, in fact is, So basically, in a nutshell, I think that the ECU poll is very similar to ours. It's just that with ECU, I think they modeled it a little bit more democratic. All right. Yeah, it is a little different of a mic. Bear with me. When Barnes gets on here, I'll play around with it for a second, but I don't want to go too much on it here. Hold on. Bear with me. Check. You can hear me now and it sounds much better, right? Yeah, I had to change it. It'll probably change for you in a second. I had to go back to the other one. Yeah, now we're on the good one. Yeah, I don't know why that's going on. I think it's because I'm going back and forth from different shows and different stuff, and it keeps like taking off my mic from one and going on to the other. All right, let me play. Actually, real quick, let me get something out of the way real fast. All right, announcements. All right. The links for the live results, I will share with you when we can do that without putting up like test data and then creating a conspiracy theory. And you'll have them for tomorrow. Election coverage looks like, Laura's the boss. Looks like it starts at 6:30. Indiana, Kentucky are early. So I like to get in there as fast as I can. But it will be free. All right. And I know people are like, what the hell did I sign up for membership for? You'll get like updated episodes. There will be stuff that we'll do after the election that will just be for YouTube members and, of course, local subscribers. Best place is right there, locals. All right. And in order to do that, of course, we got to pay the bills, right? So before Barnes gets on, let me get one of them out of the way because it's interesting with this election. People are like, what is this really about? And it's really about an order, between the BlackRock crew and the government and the administrative state, what used to be called the deep state. It's not even enough to say that anymore. It's like government, big media, big corporations, and big military industrial complex all together to want. Oh, and a class of people in the upper class suburbs that aspire to be part of that. In 2016, we used to call them wannabe elites. All right. They can afford to care about the cost of milk and groceries because, of course, this current system relies on the status quo to give them a job. All right. They rely on the status quo to give them a job. So economically, even though the country just experienced the worst jobs report before an election ever in the modern era, they are okay with it because they're the ones who represent that growth. Government jobs, all right, that's one of them. That's one of the sectors, few, that continues to grow, and they rely on that, which is why I'm not as bullish, even in the event of a larger Trump win than polls would suggest. Even in that event, I still am very bearish on Virginia, even though I will tell you that tweet is right. I don't remember who did it, but yeah, Trump's internals have Virginia close. Harris's do as well, but I'm afraid that she doesn't want to make it. I think the campaign fears of causing a full fire, if pulling the fire alarm if they go there to try to defend it. All right, because for her, look at her schedule. How is she ending? It's all Pennsylvania. And we'll get into all this. I'm going to run an ad real quick here, but I will tell you, Josh Shapiro does not believe that she is going to win Pennsylvania. The early vote looks very bad for them. I'm going to play you some clips in a second. They are very worried about it, despite what you think you hear. They caused everyone that 500,000 vote firewall was something that they did. It was a low end projection. They wanted that to be the narrative. Shapiro and others, and they're smart, believe that the firewall really was always closer to 700,000 votes, and they had 1.1 million going into 20. But because of the disparity and because of the lack of turnout, the early voting turnout for Democrats, they are very concerned about Pennsylvania. And then, a couple of days ago, it was Wisconsin, and they thought that these ballots were going to come pouring in, and they didn't. All right. The update this morning was a disaster, and it did cause widespread panic among Democrats. And you're not going to hear it from me, the People's Pundit. You're going to hear it from other people. All right. But before I get on to this, look, let me do this real quick. All right. Did you know that, speaking of BlackRock and like Chinese money, did you know that they basically are behind much of the meat in this industry, and that there are all these like programs to get rid of all of the cattle farmers in Texas? I did not know this. Approached by it, check them out. I had their product. I love it. And I did want to talk to you about it real quick before Barnes gets on so we can move on. All right. Not only are they manipulating the beef industry, and our government's helping, which is sad, but whether it's ground beef or jerky or a lot of meat on the market, it's coming from Brazil, Africa, and China. I had no idea about this. And that's why I want to tell you about a new company. It's in South Dakota, and their name is Farmer Bill's Provisions. And what they're selling isn't just beef. It's beef biltong, which I had never heard of. It's originally a South African meat snack that it's made its way through the U.S. And while beef jerky is usually loaded with like sugars and soy and other stuff and preservatives like that, biltong is a traditional meat snack without the sugar, soy, the nutrients, the fillers. You can check it out. It's keto friendly, everything, which I did try once. Anyway, they source their beef and bison from the grasslands of South Dakota, and they support American ranchers. They sell pre-sliced biltong, as well as 1 pound charcuterie. I always messed it up, slabs, when we're doing it for the Feast of the Seven Fishes. I'm always like getting ready for tomorrow, and Laura always has to correct my pronunciation of that. Sorry, I'm not sophisticated. The slabs are like a massive dry aged steak with marbled fat, the perfect amount of spices and salt. They're delicious. I was just snacking on them before. And that's why I'd recommend going to check out the bestseller bundle, which includes a 4-pack sampler. All right, it's a 1/2 pound original slab. They're grass-fed tallow bomb. It's really cool. The bestsellers bundle, by the way, ships for free. And every order supports American ranchers and keeps our farmers out of the hand of BlackRock and foreign investors who want to buy up all the precious farmland. I had heard about this in the past. I just didn't know it was so serious. Guess what? It is. Head over to farmerbillsprovisions.com. The link is in the description, or click on the link. Yeah, again, right there. And use the code RICH. All right. Save yourself 10% off today. Click on that link below in the description. Save yourself 10%. It's delicious. It's really good. I mean it right now. I'm not even kidding. Still, absolutely. I like, I'm a spice guy. Chili is, I like spice. So just to let you guys know, if you like chili, you'll like it. If you're not a heavy spice person, go with the regular biltong. And it really lasts for a long time, by the way. All right. Let's go. Let's do this. And then I got to show you Pennsylvania, because there's something else I got to hit on, which is this. And actually, let me play the video quick, because there's two purveying wisdoms out there. One is, all right, and we saw the pollsters do it over the weekend. All of the polls shifted on average about 4 points to Trump from the prior polls to the finals, except for Maris poll, right? Which you all know what Robert and I think of the Maris poll. And don't take our word for it. Go look it up. They did herd at the very end of 2016 to get the popular vote correct, but their state polling was awful. And by the way, they haven't predicted a Republican victory since never. Go look, and you will see that they even had Kerry winning and winning comfortably. All right, so they can take this A+ that they get from the fake Pollster scorecard and stick it up their ass. They are modeling an electorate that is more Democratic than 2020. All of the polls on average, from the New York Post to NBC News, all the way down the line, even Yahoo News, all right, they all moved on average of 4 points from the final poll that they did about a month ago to now a tie, roughly a tie, or even with Trump ahead on the full ballot. This is a bit of a scam we saw in 2020 as well. The head-to-heads were showing large leads for Hillary Clinton, or larger leads. But if you looked below the numbers and you looked at what about with Stein and Johnson, a full ballot, the real ballot, and you would see that the race actually wasn't that far of a miss. The polling miss was not as big as everyone seemed to have thinks when we think back about 2016. It wasn't as big as people think it was. It's just that they were repeatedly reporting and focusing on the average of the head-to-head, which was a race that did not exist. In this case, when there is a significant share of a third-party vote and it does impact the top of the ballot, then the full ballot is the better measure. I cannot stress this enough. Kellyanne was talking about it. She was a pollster. She knows. But also, she was also the first female campaign manager to win a presidential election. That, of course, she did with Donald Trump in 2016. All right. They did this to her constantly. And I'll never forget the Trump campaign going, why don't they ever report the full ballot? Why do they just always, they're doing the same thing here. And on the full ballot, from the New York Times to NBC News, basically everybody, Trump and Tip, who, by the way, is very accurate, they all have Trump up by 1 in the popular vote. It's very close to our final, which hasn't really changed all that much. All right. You're going to see it in a little bit, but it hasn't changed. All right. It's a 1-point lead on the final ballot for Donald Trump, and it is a 50-50 tie. No, you all hate that, but it is. It was by the way, we had the 50-50 tie before everybody else did. All right. So we'll talk about whether they're hurting or not. When you hear people talk like Nate Silver talking about hurting, all right, he's not taking into account that polls are done individually. All right. For a good synopsis on that, go check out Patrick Ruffini. All right. He wrote about this on Twitter earlier today. Nate Silver is not a pollster. All right. He has no idea what he's talking about when it comes to conducting polls. They're always like famed pollster. He wouldn't know his asshole from a hole in the ground about polling. He doesn't know. He thinks he's a statistician who can apply what he knows to polling, like he tried to apply it to sports, to handicapping in sports, and it hasn't worked out that well for him. It is not like all polls are done at once and the pollster does it. It's ridiculous how he tries to project it. Every poll is tailored individually and weighted individually. Right. So, yes, it is possible to get these races within a point or two of each other. And he name dropped Emerson, which is outrageous. Emerson's been one of the most accurate pollsters around. Spence does a good job. When he does miss, like we all do, at least I know that he's missing earnestly. All right. All right. Let me give you, out of the mouth of Mark Halpern, this morning, what the prevailing wisdom was before we got some updates to early votes. All right. And I want you to keep this in mind about the one argument, because I'm going to show you Pennsylvania in a second, and I'm going to show you it nested by party and gender. And by the way, Elon, thanks for letting me know that there was no audio. What the hell is happening? When you go back to Zoom and then you go back to Skype, and it's messing up the audio. Robert, you can hear me okay, right? He can. All right. So let me play this Halpern thing, and then when we come back, Robert will be joining us.
The pro-Trump's going to win side in terms of data. The early vote continues to be a problem in terms of how much of a lead she has and the underperformance of black voters. And let's see tomorrow where we are in Pennsylvania. But I think the delta of the Democratic lead is going to be much smaller than even Democrats said they needed to win Pennsylvania.
We'll set that standard.
But that's something to watch. In addition, the kind of conventional wisdom amongst Democrats is, and they're buoyed by Ann's poll, is she's posing strong Trumpism. And that undecided, that David Plouffe argued last week, are breaking her way. I think right now, people ask me all the time what's going to happen. I think right now, I continue to believe that for a while, it's not going to be close. Either the makeup of the electorate is going to be 55% female and she's going to win, or it's not and she's going to lose. And that could be wrong, but I don't think it's going to be different state to state. I think in 6 or 7 of the states, the electorate will be so strongly women, and so women so strongly for her that she'll win, or not.
All right. Well, we can just stop that right now, and we can add Robert. Robert, how you doing, brother?
Just got off talking to the Brits. They're asking about the Amish voting and whatnot.
Yeah.
And they always, God bless the Brits, they're like, no, we heard you had some allegations about the 2020 election having some sort of fraud. There's no evidence of actual fraud.
Well, widespread evidence, Robert.
I was like, well, and I thought about it. Well, I was like, no, I'll just get back to my, it's about whether it was constitutionally correct election. That's the legal standard, not whether it was fraud. Did only constitutionally qualified people vote? Did they only vote in a constitutionally qualified manner? And was the vote counted and canvassed in a constitutionally qualified manner? Because fraud is not the legal standard. And as a lawyer, that's all I care about. Though I was tempted to say, well, if you don't think there was any fraud, where do you think all those drop mail-in votes have gone missing? Well,
Robert,
where are all the mailin votes gone, Richard? Well, they just
you,
disappeared from everywhere. 40% of them gone bye-bye. They can't seem to find them. Don't worry, they're going to show up on election day. Democrats have convinced me. They're showing up on election day. What, the dead will rise again? Are we going to have a Walking Dead episode on election day?
I mean, Robert, the bottom line is here, you should have told him, are you aware of the no less than 4 county district attorneys in Pennsylvania right now that are investigating a Democratic group linked to Arizona, a politician, by the way, who was absolutely trying to get absentee ballots that are everything that you and I said in 2020. These are people who recently moved out of the state. One of them is dead. One of the very first folks, he sampled 5 ballots. He found 4 out-of-staters and 1 dead. All right. I mean, get out of here. Give me a break. Let's cut the shit. We all know what they do. The question is, and that's by the right, man. They were proactive this time, but the dooming is like they are their own worst enemy because our research has shown
the only way you're guaranteed to help the other side is not vote.
That's it. They're so honestly, they are. Let's go to what Halpern said right there, actually, before we get into all that, because just to finish what I was saying, our research has been very clear. The low to no propensity voters that Republicans are actually doing a very good job getting out. The number one reason in our research, and we researched them for 6 months to see why they don't vote, right? What would motivate them to vote? Why don't they vote early, Republicans? We have been doing this all behind the scenes for months and months, actually more than that now, since the 22 election. And the data was always very clear that the number one reason you can get these normies not to vote is to make them think that the election is rigged and that their vote doesn't count. So when you have people out there talking the way that I'm not going to name some of these people, they know who they are. They make a living off the grift. If they don't have Wednesday where they can cry the election is stolen, they have no purpose on planet Earth. So they want that to happen. I even think they're part of a psyop, and they're just being used by it because they need their own personal interest. But secondly, Mark just said there really are 2 things. Let's cut the shit. The early vote's horrible for the Democrats. All right. They don't have an election day apparatus the way that Republicans do. They have no early vote. They have the parties, folks, the partisans of the party listen to the party strategy. So like if the party says vote and vote early, bring friends, that's what the partisans will do. If like Republicans, they would say vote on election day, mail isn't good, then they would vote on election day. Robert and I tried to explain this to everybody in 2020 when everyone was talking about how much early vote there was for Democrats. And we were trying to say, no, this election will be much closer because Republicans are going to come out in droves in election day. And the question is, can they wipe it away or not? This year is very different. It tells us more about the Democrats than it really does about the Republicans, with the exception of low propensity. It tells us their enthusiasm. So on the one side of what Mark was saying, it's like the Republican side of it, that we know is true. What the Democrats are saying about the female vote, we now know is not. I tried telling people, wasted tons of hours last week, that Look at the research. We knew this and we expected this. Men vote later, and men will vote on election day. They're the hardest to convince, especially Republican men, the hardest to convince to mail their vote in. They will come in person late, which is early vote, but later in person, or they will drop it off on election day, or they will vote on election day. It is something Republicans are going to have to work on moving forward, but the electorate is no longer that female anymore. Harris campaign keeps using a graph that's 10 days old at this point. All right. So North Carolina is a great example. Florida is a great example. Now, Arizona is a great example. That is not more female. So take it away, Robert. What do you think that means then?
Well, I think here's my base case for the election, sort of quickly summarized.
Do it in your order.
Where we stand today, going all the way back. So I started out with the fundamentals that do people feel more prosperous with this administration? Do people feel more safe with this administration? Historically, if those are neutral numbers, then you have a tight election. If those numbers are very positive, the incumbent administration is going to win a lot more often than not.
Yeah.
And if those numbers are very negative, then the incumbent administration loses every time and loses from an electoral college perspective in a wipeout. And the numbers were extremely negative on both, which we've only had in really one election in American history, 2008. That's the only time you had people feeling very unsafe because of either foreign war or domestic chaos, and feeling bad about their economic prospects and their economic well-being. The economic condition, and I use third-party standards for this, not Alan Lichtman's subjective 13 keys and nonsense. It was, what did the University of Michigan Consumer Sentiment Index say? What did Gallup's Economic Confidence Index say? And it was reporting the most negative economic numbers, particularly amongst working class voters, outside of 1992 and 2008. And if they had numbers, 1932. I mean, it was that bad. That's a horrendous environment for any incumbent. Even, Bill Clinton, didn't matter who the incumbent was, even a great politician running it. And instead you have Kamala Harris. One of the added factor I use is the incumbent party divided. Well, I would call throwing out the incumbent on the eve of the convention a divided incumbent party. So all of the fundamentals screamed this was going to be a challenger election.
Yeah.
And then we go to the second standard, which in the last 4 presidential cycles, has been the most predictive of any predictor out there. Yep. The best predictor has been the Gallup party affiliation data in the last quarter before the election.
Let's put it up.
And the Gallup top right there. I mean, so you look at 2008, they predict a D+8 electorate. Obama wins by 7. They predict D+4 in 2012. Obama wins by 4. They predict D+3 in 2016. Hillary wins by 2. They predict D+5 in 2020. Biden wins by +4.5.
Yep.
So if anything, they slightly overstate the Democratic edge. They have never overstated the Republican edge.
And now let's show this day in history just to compare.
Exactly. So the first thing I look at is Gallup confirming my fundamentals. Gallup is saying yes, there's going to be a 7 to 8 point swing in the electorate towards Republicans, and in an R+3 environment, the top issue is they favors the Republicans. The number 2 issue favors the Republicans. Which party do you feel safer with? Favors Republicans. Which party do you feel more prosperous with? Favors Republicans. And again, this is Gallup that's been polling this for longer than any other pollster in America or in the world for that matter. So then we go to the third standards. Okay, all right. So if these fundamentals are going to translate, and if Gallup is right, we should see a 7-point trend in the polls. We should see that the polls, the same media university polls, are trending 7 points more towards Trump than they were in 2020. So I go to the national polls and I look at NBC, ABC, CBS.
Look at NBC. Oh my God! Did you
Morning
see that?
Consult? All the others.
Morning Consult.
And what do we find? And even more balanced pollsters, TIPP, Atlas International, Echelon. Yep. guess what
Tip
we
is
find?
identical to us. You're going to see Tip is identical to our final poll. Literally same margin, same I don't know what their decimal tenths of, I don't know what their actual tens of shares are, but I can tell you that they are even in the head to head, which is a hypothetical race. It doesn't exist. It's a thought exercise. Or in the full ballot, they're Trump +1. NBC is exactly identical to that. We are exactly identical to that. The New York Times is exactly identical to that. I don't know. And then you have the Maris poll that comes out with a Harris +4. I mean, what?
But again, that's +6 off of their national poll in 2020. So if you go back and look at all the data, I looked at poll to poll, final poll to final poll. The average, there's some that are 4 and 5, some that are 10 or 11, but the average is the national polls are consistent with the Gallup data that show a 7-point trend towards Trump. So then, the next explanation was, this is just Hispanics. This is just black voters. This is just the South. This is just the Sun Belt. So I look at state by state. In Pennsylvania, how much more the same people that polled 2020 to 2024, same mode, same methods. What do you find? On average, Trump is running 7 points better in this Pennsylvania's polls than he was in 2020.
Let me show ours.
7 points better in Michigan's polls than 2020 with the same pollster. 7 points better in Wisconsin's polls than they were with the same pollster in 2020.
Yeah.
Indeed, the Midwest is swinging harder than, in fact, in polling data than the Sun Belt and the Southwest is. It's about a 5 to 6 point movement in North Carolina and Georgia and Arizona and Nevada. It's 7 points or more in the Midwest. So this idea that, this is just a phenomenon amongst black and Hispanic. No, it's a phenomenon.
That's the argument. That's the argument they're making as to why the Sun Belt polling may have been corrected, but the Midwestern's going to be right, with Harris eking it out a little bit. This is what we have in the final. And by the way, that is all built upon this idea that female Republicans especially are going to cross over in big rates. I want to show you, after 1,000 people totally decided and pushed, that the subsample when you nest party with gender is obviously going to be small. So sampling errors for subgroups are higher, but we did not find that even in this final week, where I have to say something. And Robert, I wonder if you're a little bit surprised that he did this. But on the full ballot polls, not the head-to-head, Nate Cohen actually did project the Trump victory. Not the head-to-head, where he gives like Harris one path through North Carolina. In the full ballot polls, he actually gives it to Trump because Pennsylvania goes to Trump by 1. It's identical to our poll, which is really, really shocking. In the head-to-head, it is 51-49. I mean, very close, but that's not the real ballot. Putting everybody else together, they got about 4.5% of the vote. Look at men Republican versus female Republican, and men Democrats versus female Democrats. What it basically is showing was that men actually told us they were more willing to cross over than females. Now, that's not going to happen. And when this is done, you'll have all of this, guys. But the bottom line is, unbelievably, this is Mark Harris, who is a longtime pollster in Pennsylvania, is saying this exists in your mind. There is nothing in the data. This is what you want to happen. This is wishful thinking. Did we or did we not hear this with Hillary Clinton and with Joe Biden? And she is doing worse than Joe Biden among Republican women. In our poll, I went and looked. Joe Biden was getting a little over 14% of Republican women in 2020. He probably did, because he got about 9% of the Republican vote in Pennsylvania, right? Now, she's in single digits, bro. Single digits.
Even the New York Times is not finding this Republican
crossover. It's not there
in a bunch of places. So basically what your data is showing is about a 7-point movement from where you had it in 2020. So the national polls line up, the state line polls. So the next data point I would look at that we've now finalized is voter registration data. So given where the Gallup data is, you would expect about half of that, because half of that is independents just saying they lean more Republican now than Democrat. But the other half of that is actual voter registration. Actually, voter registration swing. So what you would expect is, okay, do we see about a 3 to 4 point registration swing towards Republicans across the country, and especially in the swing states? Well, guess what? Bingo, 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 bingo. There has been a 3.5 to 4 point movement of registration. And most of this, by the way, since 2022. So people are asking, why didn't it show up in 22? Because most of it has happened since 2022. Look it up. You look at Seth. I'll get his last name. I'll butcher it. Poor guy. Seth Ketchel, whatever. But, he does a voter registration model. He's predicting a Trump sweep of the swing states. But why? Because the voter registration model locks up with the polling trend data, locks up with the Gallup data, which lines up with the fundamentals. And then, last but not least, I was going to look at was the early voting data. Did we see a 7-point swing on average towards Republicans in early voting? Bingo, 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 bingo in every single state in the country. On average, we're seeing as much as 10 to 15-point movements towards Republicans, even bigger in Pennsylvania, even bigger in Arizona, even bigger in Nevada. But you're seeing at least an average of a 7-point swing towards Republicans in early voting data. Which, by the way, people are pretending that's not going to show up on election day. Good luck with that assumption.
Come on, dude.
Everything is saying the Gallup is right again, that the fundamentals matter again. For Harris to win this election, for Maris to be right for the first time in forever, well, you need to have fundamentals not matter. You need to have Gallup not matter. You need to have voter registration not matter. You need to have early voting data not matter. You need to have polling trends not that matter. You need to have the polls. God bless Sean Trendy, but get off the pot, bro. In the sense of make a decision. Because it's obvious there's going to be another polling error, and pretending that maybe it will be too much for Trump. In what world? There's Selzer put to death any thought that these pollsters have done anything to fix their error tendency. That they have the same
Robert,
bias.
it's a D+3 electorate in Iowa in her poll, Robert.
Yeah.
By the
it's
way,
a Biden +5. It's a Biden +5.
Bro.
I mean, it was the real headline. Seltzer's poll has Harris doing 2 points worse than Biden in the state. That's the real headline. If you look at the underlying metrics.
Listen to this too, because this is really the funniest thing about her poll. They have Republican men. She's got some ridiculous, no joke, 40-point swing with Republican men, while independents only move 3 points.
Yeah.
And
she apparently was unaware.
I'm going to leave this for another episode, but just so people who are there's a lot of people listening now, so I'm assuming they did not watch my live stream on local Saturday night. So I will fill them in right now. I knew about the Selzer poll on Friday. I told the guys at Real Clear Politics about the Selzer poll on Friday. And everybody was wondering how I knew, and they thought I was lying. I'm going to tell you how I knew, because somebody who was very upset that Ann was calling, laughing hysterically, talking with Harris surrogates about what she was going to do. I'm going to drop a bomb in this SOB's lap. Got so mad that they called me and said, I am very worried about this judgment. So this is how I knew. And listen, if people think I'm full of shit, call Real Clear Politics. I knew. And by the way, I'm not the only one who knew. She was calling friends around town. All right. So this is not appropriate behavior for someone who
he was calling that Abelard Pritzker.
Listen, I'm not saying she did it on purpose. What I'm saying is sometimes a pollster can see what they want to see. And then there's also
until I saw a Mark Halpert interview. Then all my empathy went out the door.
Me too.
I was like, either you're incompetent or you're a complete liar, because there's no way of answering some of those. Like, she was spinning. Oh, it's young, edgy, it's women moving on a board.
But it's not. But it's not. Her explanation.
You're lying about your own poll.
Her explanation doesn't explain the result. Abortion was the second most important issue, which was way behind protecting democracy, which looked like she surveyed a Starbucks line in Manhattan instead of the voters of Iowa.
The people in the Des Moines suburbs, the 55-year-old librarian, that the main priority is at 9 a.m. to get a double shot latte with a hazelnut, and is deciding between the hazelnut and the pumpkin spice.
Yeah.
I mean, that's who she got. That reads the New York Times religiously and is anxious about the MAGA people coming over the walls the next week. That's who she got. And she knows she got a complete BS audience. She knows she did a BS. And let's remember about Selzer. I've defended her.
I don't know what you're referring to. I double check and triple check, Mr. Gingrich.
I know. So people can go look. I've defended her in the past.
That's so
it's not like I've been a harsh critic. But here's the backstory for Selzer. She polled 2004 completely wrong, said Kerry had it in the bag, said Kerry was going to win by 5. He lost Iowa. Oops. So she restored her credibility by polling Democrats well. People forget the
Yeah.
Republican
Yeah.
caucus polls were horrendous. Horrendous in 08, or horrendous in 2012, horrendous in 2020. They've just been bad, 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 and bad. Horrendous in 2016. They've never been close to accurate because she cannot get working class Republicans to answer her polls with consistency. Then every poll taken other than her final Iowa poll since 2008 has been wrong outside the margin of error, and 90% of the time has favored Democrats. That's an extraordinary error rate. Her national polling was so bad, she got fired from continuing to do it. So to me, that's not a sign of a good pollster. That's a sign of a pollster who knows how to put out a final number that's close to the accurate number to give themselves boost in reputation. And she's decided to spoil all that to try to get Trump in 2024 and save and salvage Harris's campaign. What she's done is destroy her reputation once and for all. No one will take her seriously ever again after this.
Listen, what I basically was told, all right, and again, I mean, people can say whatever they want. I mean, they can pick up the phone, call the guys at Real Clear Politics, and they will tell you, I knew about this poll. Just like Mike Cernovich knew the real reason, along with me, for why she spiked the poll in 2020 before the Democratic caucus. It's not because Pete Buttigieg wasn't on the call list for that person. Buttigieg was the foil, folks. He was happy to be the foil because Buttigieg thought he was going to win. So when Biden's campaign was pissed they were in fourth place and they didn't want the poll to come out, he was happy to be the foil. That's why he's the transportation secretary, folks, right now. That and because he dropped out. He's a ball player. So he got a gift for being a ball player. All right. So even though he's never run anything in his life, and that's why we had cargo ships lined up miles outside the shore, because there was an incompetent guy who basically machined his way into a job he wasn't qualified for. But in any event, the official excuse was there was a woman, one of the interviewers, who had her zoom in too high, and it cut Buttigieg's name off the bottom of the thing. So somehow someone who was polled contacted them and told them, come on, folks, how many times have you been polled? You know this is bullshit. But anyway, contacted them and told them that they didn't ask me about Pete Buttigieg, and I'm a Buttigieg supporter. So based on that, they say they spiked the poll. Even Patrick Murray came to my defense when Mike and I called bullshit, because Patrick Murray, for those of you who don't know, is the pollster at Monmouth. He is a left-wing pollster at Monmouth. And he said, no, Rich is absolutely right. You simply take that interview. If you go back and look at that interviewer, if any of her responses have Buttigieg, you keep the rest of what she did. You junk that one because maybe she just did it on that one. If not, let's say she didn't, and the Zoom was in and she missed Buttigieg, then you remove the responses collected by that interviewer and you keep in the field collecting. That's it. It's a simple fix. You do not spike a poll, especially a nationally recognized, highly anticipated poll, because the Buttigieg campaign complained to you about one interview where perhaps the person's name wasn't on the list. As Mike knows, because he got it from a different person, obviously, like I got it, but that was not the real reason. The real reason. And then
during peak election season, you don't constantly put out numbers that inflate the Democratic margin. That's Robert, what she has done over and over and over again in Iowa. She says in September, oh, it's tight. Grassley's in trouble.
We were live.
Biden's going to win.
We were live.
I mean, these were false polls. She's done it repeatedly. She's got away with it by having her last poll be accurate to preserve her reputation. She just decided to torture it all. But she's never been a good pollster. She's never been a good pollster.
Robert, we were live on this show 6 months later after she spiked that poll. We were live on this show in September polling Iowa for the Public Polling Project, showing people the live data. It was Trump +8, weighted, unweighted. It was Trump +8. We said, we're not wasting our money on this anymore. The Public Polling Project can be used for better things, and we put it on the shelf. On the show, she drops that tie. On the show. Do you remember that? Same thing with Fox News in Ohio. It was
and why?
It never was.
That's when donors are making decisions, when volunteers are making decisions. That's too much. She does it constantly.
Too much to ignore. Too much to ignore.
And again, 95%. Sean, Sean Trent, you're not sure which way the polls are biased. How can I bet on them being biased in the same direction, election after election after election, with pollster after pollster after pollster? Yeah. I mean, at some point, come on. I mean, look, I know he doesn't want to get in the middle of all this, debate, but it's got to be called out for what it is. I mean, this is Democratic bias in the polls by media and university pollsters who get financially rewarded for that bias. People who do any degree of objectivity get fired. whether it's ORC at CNN, whether it's Langer at ABC, anybody that does of just a little bit of objectivity, they get fired. And people like Trendy, who are in that space, I like Sean, great guy, known him for a long time, known him from Yale, got to call it out, because otherwise this crap is going to keep happening, and it embarrasses the entire profession of polling for the whole world.
And for the whole world, not just for us, for the whole world. And I'm sorry, I'm old school. I believe in what George Gallup used to say. Like, you, at this point in a modern society, right, you cannot, because we just grew so big for our britches, right? So there has to be some mechanism. This isn't the colonies anymore. There has to be some mechanism where elected officials know what their voters, what their constituencies want. You know, the majority of them, they have to be able to understand their opinions. And if you're so wild, look, everyone's going to be a little off on an election here and there, you know, you're going to get something wrong, but this is repeat behavior over and over again. And if we can't trust you with coming even close to the vote, and it's always biased in one direction, then how are we ever going to trust you with issue polling, right? Because if you don't know how they're going to vote, you don't know how they support or oppose a particular issue. So,
which was why George Gallup cared so deeply about election polling.
I miss Gallup. I miss Gallup.
Which, by the way, I was reminding Trendy when she forgot. Even Gallup struggled badly whenever there was a big class divide in the election. It drove Gallup crazy. He went to great lengths to try to fix it. But the reason why he got 48 so wrong was because under the hood, his margins had been way off in 44, 40, and 36.
Yeah.
Bro, there was a massive class
Literary Digest poll. That was like an 80,000 sample poll or something. They totally blew it because they missed the class divide. And then fast forward to 2012 when they gave up. Romney versus Obama. Obama had not, it was black women, yes, but he did better with white non-college voters because Romney was a rich technocrat who didn't give a shit about their issues, who didn't care about it. Was a
he made it clear.
He made it very clear.
He reminded every blue-collar industrial voter why they hated the Republican Party.
Yep. And I'll tell you, man, there's one more element to this story. All right. I don't know the woman. I'm just telling you what I'm told. Something changed after January 6th. All right. That is what I am told. That and they expressed a dissatisfaction, or not even, they'd express concern about that event compromising objectivity. However, you can't touch it, because if you do, you're in deep shit. Like, she has a bulletproof reputation in that world. And like, she's like, you know, I don't want to say it, but like, still like somebody's wearing a belt or something, like a bulletproof reputation. And if this person says anything, they could be canned. There is what, going to the point that Robert said, there is absolutely no motivation to get it right. Nate Cohen, what he did on Sunday is exactly what the industry is basically giving pollsters he gives
himself a long footnote. By the way, most of my polls are probably complete crap because the bias is even worse than it's been before.
This is what it incentivizes them to do. This is what it incentivizes them to do. Give Harris a path to victory, although very clearly
give
showing.
Harris the headlines.
Give Harris the headline, and then the footnote is, I'm full of shit. 16%, and this is what I wanted to get into. All of these final polls that are favorable for Harris, it's worse than hurting, because it's way worse than hurting. All right. If you tried to poll, trust me, I was in the field until yesterday. There are no Republicans answering phones anymore, and they stopped answering phones about 10 days ago. Mark Mitchell and I and others started talking about this. Hey, are you seeing like 15 to 20% drops in your white Republican response rates? And are blacks now anywhere between 17 to 20% of your sample, along with college-educated Democratic white voters? That is the only group answering the polls. And then, by the way, if we go and look at how the race gets closer. So in Pennsylvania, for instance, you have to include a group of voters that is, I mean, they're not huge, but hold on, let me get the exact number so I don't mess this up. All right. Because I think it's worse than the 2020 ballots, perhaps, that are, you know, people are talking about. But out of the 990 plus registered likely voters, where is it? Where are you? Out of the 942 that are certain to vote, there's another let me get the exact number. There's another 82, all right, that only are, you could put them in there, but they're only qualified potentially, depends how you do your likely voter model, because they have a 2020 vote history. They have no other vote history. And among this group, Harris leads by 6. Get this. Are you ready? With 36%. All right. And Trump Trump has 30. The rest say third party. What does that mean, Robert? What are they going to do? Nothing. They're not going to vote. I've been down this road before. They're not.
Well, that was one little component of all this.
Not going to vote. It's how I overinflated Gary Johnson's support in 16 and Oz's in 22 in Pennsylvania. This is that group. I put them in there. They didn't vote.
Yeah, the thing that could amplify this toward the end is turnout intensifying the underlying trends.
Yeah.
And there, what I was looking at was looked at useful polling metrics, which has been in the summer, early fall. Who says they're absolutely certain to vote? Who says they're paying lots of attention?
Nate Selzer agrees with you on this. In fact, he's written about this, and he's written about how final polls are not as accurate as the polls 2 weeks before the election. Remember that one?
And you showed the Harry Anton part, showing what Harry didn't show you was who it is that was less interested, because it was distinct. It was young black men, young Hispanic women, young non-college white women who are independent but lean Democrat, self-described moderates who are socially liberal, not religious, and single. In other words, a Harris voter. They were saying, we're really not going to vote this time.
Yeah.
And then when it came to voter registration, what happened? They disproportionately are the ones who didn't show up. And then what has happened during early voting? Guess what? They still ain't showing up. You're going to see a bigger racial gap, as we talked about a month or so ago, a bigger racial gap than we've seen since 2004 in terms of white and black turnout disparity. Black vote may be down to like 10% of the total vote. Like a lot of when I was worried about some of them, it's like the only area where there's been women replacing men has been Republican women replacing young black Democratic men.
That is what was going on. You can see it at the micro level. If you look at a state like Pennsylvania, it is very obvious. The reason why there was, and there's not anymore, but there was more women in the early vote electorate is because more Republican women were there and less black men that voted for Biden in 20. And together it exaggerated that margin.
Somebody else has got to ruin their reputation finally. Johnny Boy out of Nevada.
I told you he was going to predict
Harris is still going to win.
I told you he was going to predict Harris is going to win. I told you that.
Of course but people forget he predicted Rosen would win in a walk. Rosen barely won. He predicted Lombardo would lose. Wrong again. So Johnny Boy, I'm going to have
Lombardo
fun making fun of you and your bogus reporting for more than a decade now.
He did predict Lombardo would lose. Let me ask you a question. Is he doing that because that last early dump got Democrats within 20,000 or no? Because I think do mental gymnastics
that there's massive election day.
No. He's not. So you're telling me there wasn't a chunk of mail-in balloting that got Democrats to break the 40,000 mark. They did not get below because everyone can go back and look at his own. His website's broken right now. I was trying to go into it, but unless there was a huge mail-in dump in Clark that brought the gap to below 20,000, then he's contradicting himself because he's been writing the entire time that Harris cannot do it unless he gets, first it was 20 to 25, I think. And then first it was below 20. Then it was 20 to 25. Then on Clark, we somebody we were talking to over there, she said, we're going to work 10 hours a day. There are 45,000 ballots. The drop boxes look full, but remember, drops lean a little bit more to the right. They're still Democratic, but they lean more to the right. The U.S. Postal Service is heavily D. Anyway, they count it up and she sends it to me and it's like net 2 something. And I'm like, wait a minute. And she revises it. Oh no, it's 6. Sorry. And I'm like, well, where's the other 3,000? There should be a 9,000 net here. And then she gets back to me and says, it wasn't 45,000. It was 35,000. And I said, okay, where's the rest? And she said, that's it. No more accepting. That's all. We're just staging the machines now. That's it. So I'm thinking to myself, I know vote trickles in, but if they don't get a huge dump on Monday, then how is Ralston going to pull mental gymnastics to get this out? Because Harris now needs to win independents by a larger margin than Joe Biden did, and he needs them to be more of the electorate than they were in 2020, because so many more Republicans are in the electorate in Nevada than it was in 2020. It was supposedly in the exit polls about even. Truth is, it wasn't. Democrats had a registration edge in the electorate. This time, I mean, it's probably going to be R+1, registration R1.
I mean, right now,
R2.
oh yeah, well, it's going to be even on election day registration.
Yeah.
And Democrats have never have always underperformed their registration in Nevada. So
always they do. You're right. They do.
That's without. So that means it's going to be R+. And the only question is, how R+ is it? Right now, it's R+4. And so on election, is there any real I can tell you what all the polls show is that Republicans are going to win election day.
Yeah.
So
of course. Yeah.
Of
course.
And like they're talking about Clark County mail. That Clark County mail's drop off on election day. Most of it. Those people will say that they're voting on election day. So that's calculated in to the polls. The polls are calculating in that vote.
That's true. If the pollster does not specify, sorry, I'm taking a vape. Sorry, guys. If the poll does not specify that it is, like we do it, we ask, did you vote early through Dropbox? Did you vote early in person? We break it all down, but most pollsters don't. And they'll just say, are you going to vote early? You're going to vote on election day. If you don't specifically say Dropbox or Dropbox on election day, then they will just say they're voting on election day. That's it.
Here's the thing. Like his excuse about the machine
is by mail. Yeah.
His excuse that the machine is going to get people out to vote. Why hasn't the machine got them out to vote already?
Is that what he said?
I mean, that's been the general logic. And it's like, what?
The read machine. The read
machine is as dead as Harry Reid. Okay. The read machine ain't here no more. So
the dump happened in 2020 on Saturday, was a huge dump. They did not get the dump this time. Did they? Let me read it. Blah, 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 blah.
No, they did.
No, it doesn't seem like there's
everybody was waiting for them to get it under 20,000, and they didn't.
Oh my God, that's absolutely pathetic. So he said the whole time that if Democrats don't get within 20,000 by Tuesday, they're cooked, and they're not. Folks, just so you understand, I mean, even if they got it to 10, the truth is we don't know, because Indies and Clark are going to lean more to the left, or typically do, because there's a ton of Hispanics in them, especially younger Hispanics, but they're not showing up. So that could make the Hispanic vote more right wing.
All right. The three groups we've been talking about underperforming. Young black men, young Hispanic.
I'd be worried about his prediction.
And young non-college white women. Guess what's overrepresented in Las Vegas? Young African-American men, young Hispanic women.
43,000 ballot lead right now. I just got the confirmation. They still have a 43,000 ballot lead. Oh my God. Unless Johnny knows that the Culinary Union, this is what happened on Saturday.
Doesn't really care about him.
Let me tell you what happened. Let me tell you a story. So on Saturday, and I know from people getting out and canvassing, the GOP went into very blue areas that are Hispanic, typically blue, and they were basically going and getting Hispanics to vote early. Someone who is a local elected, but obviously friendly with the Culinary Union, saw what was going on, and there were whole families of Democrats. These are registered Democrats, Hispanics, who are voting for Trump, and the Republicans were getting them out. Okay. This guy was so pissed. He made a call to the Culinary Union. Nothing happened. He made a second call to the Culinary Unions. Okay, we'll send people down there. He made a third call to the Culinary Unions, and they came down there, and all they did was watch over their shoulders for the rest of the night, just to make sure nothing was untoward, nothing was wrong. But they were not out there busting people like to go to vote for her. They weren't doing it. They were there overseeing that the Republicans weren't doing anything wrong, but they weren't out there busting humps. And by the way, look at how he hedges. Hey, John Ralston, you're a real coward, dude. 0.2%. You're a coward. You are a cowardly man. And I'll tell you what, if I was a Democrat, since you overstate Democrat margins on your predictions all the time, if I was a Democrat, I would be worried about losing Nevada with your prediction, because you are constantly overstating their chances. Joe Lombardo is the governor of Nevada right now. Remember that? Joe Biden did not win Nevada by the margin you said he was going to. Kamala Harris can't suffer that kind of a turn. You can't. So, you know, and again,
he
all
loved-
of this,
He used
you
to
don't
love
know how they're
talking about
voting.
voter registration until this cycle.
Yeah, he seems to think that there still is a 30,000 buffer for them. There is not. He got stunned. He didn't know. Remember, we did a show a month ago that Republicans were going to almost all but erase it by election day. Folks, if you've been watching us for the last couple of weeks, you remember that show. He had no idea. He tweeted late last week when the Secretary of State updated it. First of all, he said, damn, like he was mad. All right. You can't be objective if you're hoping for something or praying for something. We all have views, folks. We all have views, pollsters, forecasters. But like, if I'm looking at the data, I don't say to myself, oh shit, Democrats did this, or like, it doesn't, like,
Well,
you have to remove yourself.
I always call, money's a great equalizer. If you're willing to put money behind your bet, then that shifts your motivation to improve the objectivity of your motivation, in my experience. And that's why I challenge all these guys that, it's like, okay, if you think I'm wrong, bet me. I mean, I'll want to wager. Anybody. Steve Fezzik, Blue Horse here out in Vegas. Here, he's reading it like a political gambler, like a sports gambler, right? A sports gambler sees the polls say it's even. One is an underdog. Well, you might as well bet the underdog. That's where the value is. He doesn't understand the polls are wrong again in what they're predicting, how close it's going to be, in my opinion. But all of them, I'm like, just bet me. If Ralston really believes this, make a wager. It could be just an honor wager, like a Twitter wager. Doesn't even have to be a cash wager. But he's here in Vegas. It's enforceable. He will not have the guts to put one penny behind his prediction.
Can I just read what he says? And I'll tell you why. And this is, and if Harris does win Nevada, it won't be because of the reasons I think most of the reasons he's saying. It'll be that Republicans didn't get enough of their independent leaning groups out. And by the way, the fact that his forecast completely ignores Washoe is malpractice. Everyone who has won in the recent era, everyone who has won Washoe County has won the state. That's how Lombardo was able to hold on, by the way, when Laxalt was not. It's not that those votes alone would have got Laxalt over. It's the overlapping demographic groups that made the race tighter in Clark County. Let me read this.
Laxalt was what? 0.7 of a point?
Very close. Many people assume that the GOP catching up to the Democrats in voter registration, that the automatic voter registration plan pushed by Democrats that auto-registers people as nonpartisans unless they choose a party at the DMV has been a failure for the party. But I don't think so. There are a lot of nonpartisans who are closet Democrats who were purposely registered by Democratic aligned groups as nonpartisans. The machines also know they are and will vote for them. Bro, what the fuck are you talking about?
He knows that's completely false.
Oh my God.
The reason is Democrats want to match. Every party does this. Every party wants their partisans identified as such in the file.
Holy shit.
Because otherwise it creates a disaster for get out the vote operation, for persuasion operations, for volunteer operations, for donation operations. All right. This idea that you secretly want them registered. This is like, a bunch of Republicans are actually people who wanted to vote for Nikki Haley, and that's what all that is. Dig into the data. That's a very tiny slice because most of the people who changed their registration did so either before the primaries, after the primaries, not during the primaries, or they did so in precincts and areas that hated Nikki Haley. But this idea that people, we want false registrations on the no, you don't. Not if you're the Democratic Party. That's patently absurd. That's the ridiculousness. What I'm glad about is some of these people that I've always thought were sneaky frauds, but we're good at covering it by looking objective at the very end. The fig
Sean Spicer called it out on Halpern the other day. It was so funny. He was like, "No, Mark, I'm not going to let you get away with that." He was like, and by the way, I got a clip I got to play about that in Pennsylvania and elsewhere. This is juice. Ralston is putting his reputation on the line to help juice Democratic turnout. That is what he's doing. All right.
Exactly
I'm sorry, but that is
long
true.
Suspected he was really trying to do.
Yes.
And we were criticized for doing, but saying this guy's untrustworthy, unreliable.
He is not credible with this kind. Bro, he just spent 2 weeks saying if they don't get Republicans below 30,000 at least, they have no shot. His write-up yesterday was exactly that. And then, look, the bottom line is, let me read the last sentence, and this is going to tell you everything you need to know. The machine knows who they are, and they will get them to vote. All right, but they haven't gotten them to vote yet, dumbass. So how are they going to do that? It will be just enough to overcome the Republican lead, along with women motivated by abortion and crossover voters that issue also will cause. There is No data. This exists in the minds of Democrats, and he is a Democrat. This exists in the minds of Democrats. The data isn't there. I guarantee you he saw that Selzer poll, bro, and that's how he's justifying it. This is confirmation bias. 101. This is confirmation bias. What happens? What happens if independents are tied? He's fucked.
Which, by the way,
he's giving her the biggest margin.
Independents have voted for Trump back-to-back elections.
I was just going to say, he's giving her the biggest margin any presidential candidate has had since like Obama in 2008 in Nevada. Like, he's giving.
And by the way, he predicted this in 2016 and 2020. Both times he was wrong about the independent vote. The independent vote voted for Trump. How do you know this? Because the Democratic margin was greater than the presidential margin. Yeah. So what does that mean? That means Johnny Boy, independents had to have voted
exit
for
polls
Trump in 2016 and 2020.
Exit polls be damned, because there's a very big difference. And I wrote this up for you guys on Locals the other day, and maybe I'll show that in a second so people understand this modeling stuff and how it works. But you cannot solely look at independents in a poll who say they're independent and then think, oh, okay, I'll model that with what the poll says in the early vote or whatever it may be. You can't do that because people identify differently. That's number one. And I was going to, there's Fabrizio's got a response here, but I want to show this first. People identify differently than they are actually registered. And the problem Democrats are having right now with the independent vote is this. And this, he's saying the machine's just going to get him out, even though they didn't. I thought there was a big ballot drop for Democrats. There hasn't been. So that is a bad sign for what he's trying to say. The more you get your own vote out, the more your independents will come out, the ones that lean to you. You have to look at various things, not just how they identify in a poll when people are polling them. What is the demographic of those ballots that are being returned? Right now, in order for her to win indies, she needs a larger share of women than they have right now, and she needs them to be a lot younger. All right, and that's conventional wisdom. What happens if Trump does better with younger voters? As a lot of polls do show, what happens? That's not happening as well. So what does that mean? It means Trump's rurals are going to be voting. Their rural independents are going to be voting, even the Washoe ones, at a higher rate than Democratic ones are. Okay. So like, I guarantee you right now that Republicans in Nevada are saying there's nothing we could have done to get John Ralston to predict that we were going to win this election. Let me show you what happens when you make these phone calls. Okay. This is a poll we did in Utah for a private company. All right. They don't mind that I'm sharing this. I asked them the other day. All right. This is what happens when you ask people what they are. 43.2% of the sample said they were Republican. 31.3% said that they were independent. And 18% said that they were Democrats. 7.4% said they were something else. There are a lot of something else's in the state of Utah. When you dedupe against the voter file or do what's called a match or data append, which pollsters don't do, we do. It costs more. That's why, we don't weight by party, because we know it's bullshit. All right. You have to make sure your other groups are represented. Here's what happened when we did the data append against the voter file. Okay. 50.9% of the same sample was Republican. Democrats came pretty close, 17. Only 14.9 were independent American, even though how many said they were something else? 7.4. The rest, a lot of the American independents called themselves what, folks? Independents. Okay. Unaffiliateds, which everyone also uses basically interchangeably with independent, was 12.2. Libertarian, 2. Constitution, 1.6. United Utah, 0.9. Green Party, 0.5. So you had a lot of Republicans saying that they were independents. You had third-party people saying that they were independents. You had some, of these others, probably Greens and others, saying that they were Democrats. It doesn't work that way. So he's, by the way, ignoring, because he brought up the New York Times poll. The New York Times has her winning it by 9. Okay, good luck with that, jackass. All right. The bottom, Laura laughed. Good luck with that, schmuck. I mean, really, dude, Lombardo won them by like 3 points. Laxalt lost them by 1. That's it. This idea she's going to run away with a double-digit independent win is fantasy world. It's going to be very close either way.
Rosen underperformed the Democratic margin.
Absolutely. Which means what, Robert?
The independent vote.
What? Right.
Either the crossover vote went for the Republican or the independents broke Republican and the polling was wrong again.
It's imperfect. Right. And that's why He's ignoring all of the other polls that are in the average that are not called the New York Times, because I went back and checked. Only 2 polls out of all of those in the recent average have Harris even close to winning, let alone winning. The New York Times is like really an outlier there. Everybody, the reason Susquehanna is Trump +8 is because they have him winning independents. Morning Consult, which had now, I think it's Harris +1 or something, Trump is still winning independents. If you go down through the crosstabs of all of them, those who self-describe as independents are actually going for Trump. So he cherry-picked a poll that he liked and decided, yup, this poll says she can do it. I mean, do you remember in Dean Heller, we were trying to explain to people he was cooked and that like he needed to win independents by 21 points. And of course, John liked Dean Heller, so he entertained the concept that he did, or he could. Dean Heller lost independents, or he won them, but he won them by like, I think 5 points or something. And it was not enough. And he lost the election by a smidgen. But this idea, like there's going to be this massive, lead, especially with registration changes, the way that they are. I don't know where he's getting this from, brother. Like he thinks abortion's going to send Republican women over the edge. We've heard this all before. Hillary Clinton is winning 28% of the Republican vote. Tom Boner, target fart. Like we have been down all of these roads before. So like if, and same thing with McDonald in UF, who blocked me, by the way, because yesterday he blocked me on Twitter. Hey, alma mater, don't call me for a friggin' donation. This is what exactly is wrong with the political science department over at UF. Snowflake McDonald can't even take, it wasn't name calling. It was nothing. It was professional criticism. He's pointing out in the polling, the senior vote. This was the case for him. He did the same thing with Hillary Clinton. He did the same thing with Joe Biden. He doesn't even, and it didn't happen. So he doesn't even entertain the idea because he wants it to be true, like John wants it to be true. He doesn't entertain the idea that once again, polls could be overstating the Democratic presidential candidate's support among seniors because liberal seniors are being oversampled and super seniors are being underrepresented. And they can't, that's what has happened, folks. It's not hard. That's what Ann Selzer is going to be doing wrong in Iowa. I guarantee you that's one big part of why she'll get it wrong. I just can't understand, Robert. Like, you can't be that much of a hack. You've got to be like able to step back and say, I've been wrong here before, and here's why I've been wrong. Let's entertain if this could happen to me again. They just can't do it. And Snowflake blocked me. And that's why academic research is not worth anything. Because they don't challenge each other anymore.
I think he blocked me in the past. Because he was providing, I thought he was.
You ain't getting my money, bitches. Don't
tracking and comparing early voting data. But he's so political about what he wants that data to mean that when it doesn't translate the way he wants it to, he becomes very ideological. And like all these guys, I mean, even some, well-meaning guys, the people at the decision desk were floating the idea that maybe Seltzer's poll had great insight in it. And my favorite was McDonald picking up on the Kansas poll. By the way, Kansas polling as a whole has been atrocious. That's why one of the easiest betting political markets has been betting the Kansas Republican to overperform. Remember Nate Silver had the senator losing there a couple of cycles ago? They didn't win by 10. It was a joke. But and this was, I was going to ask you this. The group they keep missing in like the prairies when they get these polls way wrong in the industrial Midwest are older working class whites.
Always.
If you see a number that's totally whack, it's because they have older working class whites voting plus 20 Democratic. And it's like, I think I know that region and that doesn't sound right to me. And usually you dig in and Catalyst will refute it. Other post-election will refute it. But what they should realize by now, well, here's the other interesting thing. To your point about independents, the Gallup data is predicting that independents are going to lean Republican this cycle. That's what their party affiliation data is saying. It's not only saying that there's a party registration shift taking place, party identification shift taking place. They're saying people who identify as independents lean more Republican this cycle than they have at any other cycle in the last 6 presidential elections.
Yeah,
that's what that data means. And yet these polls that are not showing that.
No, Matt. Oh shit! I removed you. Sorry.
But a lot of the models show it. a lot of the data modelers, the data nerds are saying these independents look a lot more Republican
Decision
than they do
desk
Democrat.
isn't budging. Decision desk isn't budging. They're not, because they're not a poll monitoring operation at decision desk. Do polls weigh in on the model? Yes, but they do a lot of voter registration checks, voting behavior, demographic voting behavior, and then they run their simulations. They're not moving it. The Selzer poll moved Iowa to 92%, but it's like they're not budging from, it looks like, I think what they got Trump 53-47. And the reason is, it's how modeling works. Trump has more viable pass to 270. So it almost inherently gives him an edge in real modeling, like a modus or something like that, right? It's going to, because Harris needs to keep every Rust Belt state, and then she's got to box Trump out, and it doesn't. And let me play something real quick. Good.
The assumption behind all of that is that Nebraska 2 is behind the Midwest sweep.
Yeah,
is that Nebraska 2 is a lot.
It is.
And when I look underneath the data, like people kept telling me Nebraska 2 is more Democratic. Actually, registration-wise, it's 10,000 votes more Republican.
It has the registration-wise, it has gone more Republican. And by the way, I just looking at the early voting in Nebraska too, and Democrats had a lead at this point. Even in 22, by the way, folks, it was much closer. Republicans right now are currently outvoting them, and Democrats are going to need to squeeze a bigger lead out of independents. I think that Nebraska 2 is a financial sector. So I think they probably will hold that, Robert. Look, if it's a wipeout situation, to me, I look at Nebraska 2 like I look at Maine 2. Like, Trump could lose every battleground state. He's still going to keep Maine too, so could he carry Nebraska to? Yeah, he could. Theoretically, he can, especially with turnout being what it is. I want to, because this is all our opinion, and people are going to be like, oh, well, guys, this is your opinion. I want to play a clip. I heard him do this before, and he did it, and nobody listened to him. And he's doing it again this year, and he's doing it about the same state. In 2016, Van Jones was privately telling Obama she's going to lose. She's going to lose because of Pennsylvania. And it wound up being everything. However, he sounded exactly like this. Let me play this clip, okay?
Philadelphia is where we've got to run up a big margin. But Philly overall has been trending down, not in terms of going toward the Republicans, just people not getting out to vote. And so you got people out there like Pastor Carl Day, who's got a bunch of young men with him, knocking on doors, trying to get people to come out. It's a bigger, tougher fight in Philly to get that vote count up than it has been in the past. That has me worried. The other thing that has me worried.
Why is that, Robert? Young black men, they don't want to vote. They don't want to vote for her.
It's because
I'm going to keep playing it, but go ahead. Yeah, I want to hear your take.
To quote In Living, the old In Living Color, homie, don't play that when it comes to Kamala Harris. That's the reality of it. And young black men have been signaling this the entire year, that they have no interest or enthusiasm for Harris, and that some are going to vote Trump at a higher rate than they've voted Republican since 1972, and the others were going to just stay home. And the part of Trump's margin was going to be really improved because, in part, the votes that don't vote that would otherwise be Democratic votes. And this is all over take a look. My favorite barometer, thanks to John, I always get his last name wrong, Cavillion, I think it is, the Louisiana guy that tracks Louisiana data. So he's been predicting this, but the racial early vote turnout in Louisiana has been very predictive nationwide.
Yeah, it is.
In fact, it's been more predictive than North Carolina, Georgia, elsewhere.
It is. Yeah.
Louisiana, it's the biggest gap since back before 2004. You're talking about what was about 30% of the vote being a black vote in the early vote is down to 25% of the early vote being black vote. That's a 15% relative decline. That is a racial disparity gap that went, from 65, 35 point gap to 70, 25. That you're talking about when the census does this post-election, we are on schedule for a 15-point white to black racial gap turnout gap. And where does that also show up? Now, obviously in North Carolina and Georgia, but it shows up in Las Vegas. It shows up in Phoenix. It shows up in Detroit. It shows up in Milwaukee. It shows up in Philadelphia. And look at what Patrick Ruffini and others are pointing out. Guess where you can already see it? Very low turnout in Black precincts and Hispanic precincts in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Very low turnout in Black precincts in Milwaukee.
Big time.
Very low turnout in Black precincts in Detroit. This is going to get magically fixed on election day? Don't think so.
Yeah, I'm going to finish playing this and then listen to what he's saying. The bottom line is, and the reason why I heard it and I thought about it, Robert, real quick before I play it, is because we texted when we were doing text to online. We had a let me look. He was in his 30s. I want to say he's like 36. I'll look in a second. I want to say he was like 36 years old because he was in his upper 30s, if I remember correctly. And he said that they were trying to get him out to go vote. And he said, no, I'm sorry. Right. So the bottom line is that's when I really just say, you got to interact with this guy, get more out of him. His thing was that he was told Trump was horrible. And he was like, I don't know. I mean, is he like, I'm just going on my life. And he was a normie dude, whatever. And he's like, all right, Black community needs me to vote. I'm going to go vote. He was told the guy was sane. He was told the guy was lucid, right? And then he wasn't. And then he was senile. And then the economy went to hell. And then this and then that. So he's not voting for Trump, but he's not voting. He's not going to. So normally I wouldn't waste the time on screening out people. Like when people are screened out, folks, they're screened out. But when someone's willing to tell you why they're not voting, I wanted to listen.
And remind people, you did a big survey, a special super subsample
yeah.
of people who were opting out that were 2020 voters and what they look like.
That's right. And they're Harris. These should be Harris votes, and they're not. All right. So he's saying they're having a difficult time. Well, we know that because we can already see it. And again, with Pennsylvania specifically, their number was 500,000. I'm going to read you what Tony Fabrizio said in a second because he put out something and I got it. But their number was 500,000. Actually, people were wrestling more with like 700,000. But now it's like, they shouldn't even have brought that number up because it doesn't look like they can hit that one. All right, let me play this clip while Robert goes and does what he's going to do.
Is that the Jewish vote in the suburban areas, Biden won the Jewish vote by 70%, 70-30 last time. Some polls show Kamala at 50-50. That is 70,000 votes we've bled away. That is the margin for victory. So you got groups like Zioness, Amanda Berman out there fighting to get the Jewish vote back on board. This is a tough
Trump campaign doing ads
and
to
the
try
Trump
to
campaign pushing the other direction. So this is it is door to door.
Door to door.
Bruised knuckles, tired legs, a lot of coffee, and I'm nervous and worried, and I'm not going to be anyway until this thing gets called.
Okay, is there anything that is making you happy about Pennsylvania?
No, there's nothing making me happy about Pennsylvania. You got David Urban out there causing us trouble in the rural parts of the state. Get David Urban on this show and keep him here all day, and then I'll feel better.
And then I'll feel better. Well, I'll tell you what, he's not going to be. Wait till Robert comes back and say, I knew he's got something to do. But he's not going to be. And I'm telling you, I would have disputed that 500,000 vote number. I would, because, you could have Republicans come out and do man, I never will doubt the ability of Republicans or Trump to get a subset of Republicans out that are very difficult. And then there's something else now at your back, Robert, I wanted to ask you about. You and I talked a lot about social biases. I've been measuring it again. Do you think there's a shy Trump vote is now exactly identical to what it was in 2020? People ask the neighbor question, which is an old trick. We have our own social indicators. Are you comfortable talking to different people and being honest about your political beliefs, such as how you intend to vote? We, on every survey, have gotten responses from people, in a way with something we've never heard before. And I heard Robert Cahaly discuss this in an interview I think he did a couple of days ago. And I had talked about it a little bit too. And I'm stunned other pollsters aren't bringing it up. In 16 and 20, it was a true social bias. It was like, you're not a good person. If you don't vote for Trump, I don't want you to know, I don't want you to know I'm a Trump supporter. Or maybe I'm even a little bit afraid of professional or whatever I could be. But again, that's social exile. That's a social bias. That is not what we're hearing this time. Who are you from? Do I go on a list? Who's going to hear this? Man, we have had people tell us, man, the FBI could be listening. Like, I don't know how, as pollsters, we totally skipped over the conversation of perhaps a vote that nobody wants to express because they're afraid. This has never happened in the United States before, whether left wingers want to admit it or not. If you see it another way, I would strongly recommend you trying to put the shoe on the other foot here and hear what I have to say. They put Trump supporters in jail. If Trump loses this election, he could die in prison. They have raided countless people's homes. They have gone door to door, arrested grandmothers, door to door, arrested grandfathers, locked people away who had cancer and didn't give them their cancer so they die in prison. This happened in the United States of America. It's the same reason why people don't want to sometimes tell you the truth about guns. They don't want to buy guns in a state where you go on a list. Only it's 10 times that. I don't know how we could be honest and say, or at least entertain the possibility that I don't know how big it's going to be. I don't know. But I'm telling you, I have never been in a cycle where people have been afraid to tell you a social pressure, one thing. Humiliated, sure. Like I'm humiliated. I don't want to tell you who I'm really going to vote for. Fear? Never. So on that note, this is totally new. And I don't know what to do with it. And I don't know how any other pollster can claim they do. And I know I'm not the only one hearing it. Robert's not the only one hearing it. Mark Mitchell's, he knows. Everybody knows. But like media and university and other pollsters, the election mafia, they don't want to address this at all. And we're going to find out very soon. We're going to find out, in 36 hours, whether or not, by that time we'll have a lot more results. 36 hours. But we're going to find out whether or not that was a big enough vote to have like a massive, like what we could be talking about. Is that part of what happened here?
Yeah, well, at least you look at the neighbor polling data, and that's 6 to 7 points. Yeah, it's trending 6 to 7. Yeah, for those that don't know,
4 in 2016, folks. 3 to 4 point difference. It's 6 to 7 on the neighbor question this year. Why? They're afraid.
And for those that don't know, the question is, who do you think your neighbors are voting for?
Yeah.
And so typically it tends to be a projection of who the person themselves is voting for, but doesn't want to say a certain percentage of that. And
That's
so
right.
It's a way of filtering out social bias in general, not universal, but pretty effective. And that gap is 7 points rather than 3 points would suggest, that there's more shy Trump vote than 2016. And you've given a good reason as to why it is, because most people feel more comfortable being in public for Trump in places that they didn't before, California, New York, et cetera, in minority communities and affluent communities. But the flip side is the public punishment that probably has been amplified not only by the Biden administration, but by COVID policies. So, I saw someone who wrote in Twitter.
That's a good point too. Yeah.
They're in California, and they say, they're a Trump supporter, Republican, but they say, the going out public has a whole bunch of costs attached to it. Nicole Shanahan's talked about this.
Yeah.
That, that being pro-Trump has a whole bunch of cost in the financial and tech communities.
Yeah. Professionally too. It could hurt.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Financially, professionally. But now we're at a point, Robert, where these people are expressing, fear that this could hurt their liberty. This is something I've I had a transcript handed to me where the guy was like, he just wasn't familiar with me, but I was like, don't do that, because I have a big thing where it's like, don't ever tell anyone, and tell all these agents, don't ever tell anyone that you can say this is Big Data Poll. Hello, Robert. This is Rich from Big Data Poll, blah, 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 with the prompt. You never say, hey, this poll is the poll that's conducted by the People's Pundit. Don't ever say that. All right. This guy was so concerned about taking the poll. He said, can you call me back in 5 minutes? They called back, right? He wanted to look up Big Data Poll. He found me. He was like, oh, it's the People's Pundit. Like, he was like not trying to take the poll. And I'm not a very well-known guy. You know what I mean? But like, he was clearly a political dude. Normally the high interest people who would know you are the ones that are most likely to take the poll. And here we have a guy who is a high interest guy who's shying away from the interview and only agreed to take it 5 minutes later when he was okay with going through it. I mean, wow. And then we have this, concept where we're getting closer to the election. It looks closer. Maybe part of the dip off with interviews from Republicans is that they early voted. Maybe the other part is they're hedging. And it's like, well, if he doesn't win, I don't want to be the one on a line and some list somewhere, on some pollster's list who said he was going to vote for Donald Trump. Like, I don't want to be on that list. So I don't know, man. I'm just saying, like, there are a lot of reasons for pollsters to talk about potential misses. I think Nate Cohen actually did a very good job in his article explaining that. I mean, I think he did Trump a solid. Honestly, I really do. Compared to what he's done in the past, I think he did him a solid. But
he's trying to preserve some degree of respectability.
Yes, he is.
When his polls turned out wrong.
If they're wrong, he's screwed. Yeah. I mean, right. Well, he would be if he didn't do that. He would be screwed.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I'll give him credit for being forthcoming about it. I mean, he could have hit it, could have just been purely partisan, and he wasn't. He did put out the footnote. By the way, we're experiencing the exact same problem we've always had. We can't reach the certain group of Trump voters in certain parts of the country. Yeah. And it looks like the problem is worse this cycle than it was the last two. Yeah. I mean, that was honest. And so I'll give him credit for putting that out there. Now, to be honest, here's what intrigues me. I mean, to be frank, I mean, I like Atlas. I like Rasmussen in Trafalgar and what they try to do, and Patrick Basham and what they try to do. But the only pollster who I have confidence in to accurately get the industrial Midwest has been what you've done. And it's getting these key voters. And, without giving out proprietary information that will have
Robert has some of, so let's be careful.
They'll have Laura kill you live on scene. But there are things they could do, like the New York Times, to get these voters. But I assume it just means you have to spend more money and time to get bigger subsamples. Also, I think you have to know who it is. You have to have a sense in your head.
That's the second part. That's
what kind of vote this is that you're missing in order to know whether you can get somebody that's actually representative of that community.
Bottom line, there's two parts to it, and every time I run around country giving speeches on this, I always say that some of it is methodological and some of it is ethical. Honestly, it falls within that, and they overlap sometimes, and those lines get blurred. One of them is, first of all, and I think any pollster will tell you this. Mark is going to tell you the same thing. Robert's going to tell you the same thing. Robert Cahaly over at Trafalgar. If you cannot be up against a hard deadline. Sometimes it comes back right, sometimes it doesn't. And it's like, what's right? Not what the results you want. Representation has got to be reached. Sometimes that happens super easy. And you're like, great, let's bundle it out, get it out there. And then sometimes it doesn't. And you have to stay in the field longer to make sure you get that. If you're like what Nate Cohen did, I suspect if he had more time, he probably would have tried to stay in the field, but he ran out of time if you look at his field dates. And then the second part is financial too. I don't know how much he's got that he can go back to the New York Times and say, look, man, I need another like 20 grand to do this. Like this is going to be wrong if we do it this way. That's a major part because people, and we know this, people have had their budgets reduced. The New York Times over there has a strike going on. And for those of you who don't know, I mean, they have problems. So that could absolutely, I don't know. He's never spoken about it, but I can imagine how, working with media companies on my own, I can see how what's going on at the New York Times could impact that work. And then also, how would Nate know who it is? When was the last time Nate was out in Westmoreland, Pennsylvania? When was the last time that Nate went to Macomb County, Michigan? When was the last time that Nate went and visited Sauk in Wisconsin? Like, how the hell would he know, right? How would he know? These people are trapped in cubicles in the DC burbs and in New York and in, Silicon Valley. They don't know who these people are. So when you're like Marist, they used to be a very conservative college. Even when their original poll was run, their culture was conservative. Their funding was conservative. They have now been completely taken over by left wings, and they have a total bubble wrapped all around them. Could you imagine putting out a D electorate in Georgia with what we're seeing right now for people who don't know. And that's a good segue into what Tony Fabrizio put out, the Trump campaign put out, which I wanted to show you guys. But every county that was Trump plus 70 or above has basically either approached reaching the 2020 level or it has surpassed it. It is the Democratic Biden counties who were mired in the 70s. Like, guys, when Fulton County and everyone went in an uproar, kept the office open so people can come in, I swear, do you know what we heard from the clerks? You know how many people walked into that one office that set off the wildfire? 100 people. Not 1,000, not 100,000, 100. But, and then, you know, obviously the shit hit the fan, but like, it wasn't this big, huge inpouring of people who were dying to vote for Harris. So like, can you imagine if you're married, you're in this bubble, you actually look at that electorate and you're like, oh, this is right. Come on, you know? And this is what they're saying. Oh man, that's small. Jesus. All right. And then I'm going to play a clip to back it up because obviously, let me just read the numbers. All right. Forget about what the strategists are saying. Look at the numbers. All right. You don't need to take our word for it. According to the Democratic data expert, Tom Boner at Target Fart, Arizona, urban turnout is down 385,285 votes compared to this point in 2020. Female turnout is down 170,011 votes compared to 2020. Rural turnout is up 14,124,000. Somebody please remind me how much Donald Trump lost the state of Arizona by. Georgia, urban turnout is down 153,846 votes compared to 2020. Female turnout is down 46,732 compared to this point in 2020. We didn't even get into white versus black, Robert, right? Rural turnout is up. Are you ready? 171,837 votes compared to this point in 2020. Can someone please remind me how much Donald Trump lost the state of Georgia by? Michigan, urban turnout down 321,523. That's Biden's margin times 2.1. And then female turnout down 204,856 votes. Rural turnout up 55,951. And in North Carolina, urban turnout down 175,470. Female turnout down 154,459. As people I tried telling throughout the week, this is the pattern. Men will vote more as it gets later in person. Michigan did not even open in-person early voting until Saturday. So all of that talk was dooming talk from the right. They get tricked every time. Honestly, Robert, the right is sometimes their worst enemy. And
remind me,
go ahead.
What was your lead for Trump in Michigan? Was it 2?
It was 2. Yeah. I mean, the one ballot.
I think you're going to be right. Did you notice who did not endorse Harris this weekend?
I know. And by the way,
Rashid Tlaib. Yeah. I mean, you want any more indicators that the Muslims and the Arabs have given up on the Harris campaign? Their only representative in Washington refused to endorse them. Someone that has gone around hating Trump for forever wasn't enough for her to endorse Harris. That tells you where things are heading in Michigan.
Dearborn Heights is majority Arab. The largest subgroup is Lebanese. They represent about a third of the vote. Okay. The Arab mayor of Dearborn Heights is Lebanese and endorsed Donald Trump. This happened, by the way, a ton of Somali leaders in Minnesota. I cannot tell you how a pollster really cannot pull that. We did see, we got him at like 35% of the Arab, the Muslim vote. All right. We have him at about 35%. For people who don't know, the polls kind of were pretty bad in Michigan in the primary. They did know that there was a large uncommitted vote, but some polls underestimated it by like half. It was double the size that they expected it to be. How did that happen? Because all of those populations in Dearborn Heights as communities tend to vote together. You have the first Arab mayor telling people in the community, you don't have to, love Trump. You just have to punish the Democrats for doing what they did. Like at least and everywhere
and vote for
I
peace.
Listen to these people.
Trump gives you the best chance of peace.
Everywhere I listen to
if you're
these
Jewish,
leaders.
Trump gives you the best chance for peace. you're Muslim, Trump gives you the
They
best chance.
all said the Abraham Accords. They were like, look, we know he supports the Jewish cause more, but he will sue for peace. The Democrats are trying to fence ride where we support you. We do. And then they tell AIPAC, we support you. We do. Meanwhile, there's in their mind a genocide going on. So like, this is how they feel. I'm not saying, don't get mad at me. I'm telling you how these are like real people and they have real feelings and real opinions. And this is what they feel like. I'm telling you, I've kind of seen something like this happen before and you just don't pick it up. And we did see this in the primary where some of those precincts were nearly universal, 98% uncommitted. I mean, unbelievable shares of the vote.
Remember, the same thing happened in the Somali areas in Minneapolis. So
I
think two things we may have thought about building into the election. One was tracking the uncommitted vote and how much that uncommitted vote in the Democratic primary may show up as either not voting or Trump voting or
dawned on me 2 days ago.
Yeah,
it dawned on me 2 days because I wasn't expecting that. I mean, I did. We had talked about how much he was doing, Ben. There was a Yahoo News poll, by the way, when everybody missed this. It was what's Al Jazeera, Yahoo News or something. It was done by YouGov. And it was like Trump +2 among Arab Americans. It's a huge oversample of Arab Americans, folks. I mean, we may have missed this. I don't know. We're gonna see.
YouGov is not notorious for its pro-Trump bias.
No. And this is, look, let's get to the early vote here. I want to play one thing by two.
One other component.
Ahead, yeah,
I was going to raise. What's interesting when I was looking at some data where there may be some surprising trends is go back to Zogby's Zogby was one of the better national pollsters over the years. Hasn't polled this year because he was polling for Kennedy's during the campaign.
Yeah, so he's not doing it. Yeah.
But remember that massive being state by state, big, massive sample they did?
Yeah.
What's interesting is look at the states where Kennedy overperformed, like particularly where like Kennedy would actually beat Biden or things like that. And because some of those states may be states that the polls are also missing where there's going to be a surprise swing. Because what stood out to me was Maine was one of those states. Maine was a state where Kennedy did exceptionally well.
Yeah.
And it's like, it has that kind of voter group. Is that a voter group that's not going to get picked up in the main polls once again?
Newt Gingrich told a story about when I forgot what it was, what race it was, but like something very similar had happened. There were subsets of communities. Anyway, the local news outlet the Sunday before the election drops it. They're down 18 points. Now, I'm not saying it'd be an 18-point miss. I'm just saying, listen to what I mean by the impact sometimes that these subset communities can have. It was a governor's race. And then he won on election day. And he won because I went back and looked at the race he was talking about. There were all these like internal contradictions with the party and strife with the opponent. And then there were like, some what do you want to call them? Defections, and it was enough to really do him in. The only thing, and before I play this clip, I want this to bake in your minds. The only way, if we play devil's advocate, is let's say Trump does, because I do think it's a realignment election, and polls are, even me, will be particularly bad at picking up everything in a realignment election. It sometimes is very hard, catch you off guard. You would have to assume that this is, because it's not going to happen among Republican women. It's just not. It's not there. But maybe something with independent women, and it's not abortion or something else. Like just something else. He'll do worse with whites, but better with non-whites, and that'll twist the map inside out. It happens, folks. It happens. And pollsters are generally polling based on their assumptions that they're making from prior elections, and that's why they didn't realize that Trump was going to rip the map apart. As Steve Bannon said when we were talking the other day, it was like our polling and others when we were doing granular polling in like Luzerne County, right? And he looked at it and he was like, let's assault the shit out of the blue wall, like that. And it worked. Nobody believed it out there. That was, why is Trump going to Michigan? Is he insane, right? Obama won Michigan by 12, and then he won it by 6, and there's no chance Trump's going to win it. But there were underlying demographic changes, and there was a realignment going on. And it's possible, if you're playing devil's advocate, and you're taking the Democratic position, then that's really the only way she survives, all right? Polls be damned. Because I'm going to tell you right now, folks, how bad are some of these polls going to be? I had McSally trailing Trump by 7 points in Arizona in 2020. That did not happen. They were really very close to each other. So if Trump carries Arizona by like 6 points, 5 points, Kerry Lake is going to be elected and the polls will be wrong. Susan Collins is the only, the underdogs, by the way, first, the 11 for 12, and the underdogs are the people who go into a race where the state looks like it's going to go to another president, the other party's presidential candidate. Susan Collins didn't lead in a single poll in Maine in 2020, not a single one. And yet she won it. She's the only one to win a split ticket during the presidential cycle in the modern era since 2012, basically, right? Since 2012, because Dean Heller won Nevada while Barack Obama won the state as well, and Mitt Romney won it. Romney trailed Heller by 5. We haven't seen stuff like that at all, you know? And Susan Collins did it, and it was really miraculous. It was a huge gap.
Well,
it was miraculous.
Unusual personalities. Manchin in West Virginia,
Yep.
Collins in Maine, Heller in Nevada. It's not Gallego. It's not Rosen. It's not CIA Slutkin. It's not, it's not.
Dude, if he takes Michigan, Mike Rogers is going to win. If he takes Pennsylvania, Dave McCormick is going to win. Like, the polls are just not far enough apart. And even again, when we think they are, they have not. Even when we think the margins are big enough, they have not been. Like, folks, go look at Maine in 2020. I mean, just do yourself a favor and go look at it. And by the way, even that's same is true. Obama once had like 12-point leads in Nevada, and he did not. He won it by like 5. And then Dean Heller. So like a 5-point separation is straining it in the modern era. It really is. By the way, Henry Olsen, not a Trumper. He put his predictions on New York Post earlier this morning, and he understands what I'm talking about. There is very little chance that Democrats will be able to hold any of these states if Trump wins them. All right. It's just true. But Rich, the polls, they have not been right in these cases. They were wrong. Let me, but you got something to add to that? I'll play this. I have a clip, but if you got
just the quickest reminders of that are 2016, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Wisconsin. 2020, North Carolina, I think again, right? And wasn't Wisconsin? Who else? There was another state mixed in. Or Michigan. Michigan, James was supposed to be running way behind, and it running almost dead.
That's right. It was dead even.
It's just the numbers are that when these voters get in to vote, they're going to vote. There's very few that really ticket split anymore.
And Kelly Ayotte was running in the University of New Hampshire poll, which, by the way, closed real quick, didn't it? Holy crap. Harris barely has
given its historic error rate, someone didn't understand what I was saying. I was like, I said, look, I'm not saying New Hampshire's tied or not. I'm saying UNH, you look at its historic margin of bias, it's 5 points more Democratic than the electorate actually ends up being. And if they're saying it's +5, that means it's a toss-up. It's just close. Using their historical polling metrics.
And the sampling error of the poll itself. I mean,
but voter registration early voting, it's another state where voter registration early voting says it's a Republican trending state.
Look, it was Clinton +13, and she won it by what? 500 votes or something? I mean, it was really, and Ayotte was running a little bit ahead. She wound up losing, and she lost by like 1,500 or 2,000 more votes than Donald Trump lost. So, I mean, the dynamics of the president versus Senate, guys, like, don't live and die by the polls, even an average poll. I'm telling you, there are unfortunately some massive errors that we have seen. But yeah, listen to how Democrats really feel about this early vote, because polls are polls. We're seeing votes. And Baris, by the way, when you look at their polling, they're just, it's not justifiable. They're polling Democratic electorates, even the early vote. That looks like it's more Democratic than 2020, Robert.
Well, and to remind people, all the polls that just recently came out, especially the ones that had a pro-Harris bias, we already know whether the early voting, whether their poll of the early vote is right or wrong. It's wrong consistently. New York Times consistently wrong. Like it has a Democratic lean amongst so-called registered voters that we know is rebutted by the actual data. So we know this happened in 2022.
Well, I was just going to say, we're back here again, Robert, and we were like, This is going to be closer. We know the polling is wrong. The early vote is wrong. So we know and you know, we had my own polling too at that time. We still do here with Pennsylvania. Like my Pennsylvania early vote looks really spot on. But if you look at Maris, it does not. All right. It looks like Biden's margin in 2020. She's not getting that margin out of the early vote. It's just insane. And by the way,
I dug into Maris's numbers. Well, a couple of interesting things. Compared to 2020, they have Trump doing double digits better in the Midwest amongst independents, double digits better amongst black voters.
+7 nationally with independents.
Better amongst white working class voters in their 2020 polls. I dig in, and I'll be frank, this time I think Maris completely cooked the books because there's some like ways the numbers have been manipulated underneath that kind of look ginned up. In other words, they look like somebody got numbers they didn't like and decided to just move them around in different ways in different states to produce the outcome they wanted.
I got to tell you, I don't know. I don't know if we've talked since this, but I can tell you, like, this is the problem with switching your methodology too. Maris has never polled the way it's polling now. It has never done. It's always been a live caller poll that mocked polling like ours, always. And they tried to add online collection this time and text to online folks. And we know someone who got their link, somebody else. It was 2 people in Georgia. One is probably watching the show right now. He watches the show. But this woman too got it and was like, they're sharing it with their friends. And I'm like, that's not possible because of call forwarding or survey forwarding. Anyway, one of the people who watches the show, he texts me and he's like, no, Rich, you can manipulate the survey it very easily. So like, and he shows me and I'm like, I got to get home and look at my own desktop to see if you can do this. Absolutely. So what I mean, folks, is when you get the invitation to the survey, you should be given a unique ID that when you go to open that link, it does not let you open it unless you're the one who is taking the survey or has been invited to take the survey. Why? We don't want you sending it to your friends. We don't want you sending it to your coworkers or your family members that we know, agree with you. You will taint the survey. You'll kill the randomness of the sample, and we don't want to do it, right? And they did not block survey forwarding. And I only know they did that in their rounds of Sunbelt polls. I asked them to clarify whether they fixed that in the Rust Belt polling when they released it. They ignored me. All right. I told Tom Bevan at Real Clear Politics about it. They ignored any inquiry into whether or not they legitimately blocked survey forwarding. And there's several ways you could do it. The way I just told you, you can also do it by cookie and IP. And they didn't do it either way. So I could manipulate it, then send it to Laura. She could do it, manipulate it, send it. I mean, that's not good. But that's what happens when you think you're competent in all these different modes and modes that you have been trashing for years. And then all of a sudden you try to get in and play around without, I don't know if they polled privately to see if they had a handle on things before they did. Probably not. They just dumped themselves into the field, Robert, and decided they're going to roll with it. But let's get, you got Sean Spicer and Dan over on Halpern talking about the early vote. Listen to this. Because, I mean, we got to get real. There's real data now. All right. I mean, there's real data.
The vote is, it is not as disastrous as it was in the first 3 days for the Democrats, but it's still really bad. And the Harris campaign has done a great job of spinning the national media on it.
Spinning.
And when you talk to people in the states, whether there's two categories of people in the states. There's more junior people who don't lie about the data and what it means. What you have now is tons of senior Democrats are in the states. They're door knocking. Like people who run presidential campaigns are literally going to Michigan and Pennsylvania and door knocking. And those people are honest with me because they're worried and they're not in the business of like Wilmington is.
Van Jones.
They're really worried. Okay. They may be wrong. They may be wrongly worried. The Pennsylvania numbers, when they come out today, if she's below 400,000 vote lead compared to Biden's lead in 2020, it's going to be problematic for her.
Okay, now we changed it again. Okay, we changed it again. I got to stop. This morning, it was 5. I just played you that clip, folks. It was 5. Now it's 4. They woke up this morning to a 410,000 vote lead. They changed the goalposts because they know they're not getting to 5. And even 5 was disputed. 5 was disputed. Come on.
For those that don't remember, that the lead in Pennsylvania that they had banked, their so-called firewall, was more than 1 million in 2020. So they had already adjusted their so-called firewall to somehow magically be half that and could somehow still win an election that they only won by 80,000 in 2020. So you're going to lose a 500,000 vote edge, and somehow that's not going to impact your election day edge, your election day deficit that you're going to face inevitably and inescapably anyway. And here's one thing that's, I think, important to emphasize. In all the early voting, because there's been various talk, Republicans cannibalizing, all this stuff, there has been no great spike in Republican early vote participation as systematically overall. Republicans have voted early at about the same rate
people
as they did in 2020. And what they've done is they've done a little better with their low propensity voter, making sure they voted early. But otherwise, the Republican early vote is basically even. There isn't a bunch of high propensity Republicans that were election day voters that have suddenly shifted to early voting. That isn't there. If it was, you would see Republican early vote rising.
Well, they're a little more than in Pennsylvania.
In some states a little bit more, some states a little less, but on average, about even. What has happened is a massive decline of Democratic early turnout vote. That's the story here that the Harris campaign has tried to ignore and hide and mask, that occasionally leaks out from either Mark Halperin or Vance Jones or others. Or Obama's old campaign manager that went on MSNBC and said, by the way, the early vote data is a disaster for Democrats. That, outside of those that occasionally let the bill, spill the beans, it's a 20 to 25% decline in Democratic early voting. And you dig in and you see the demographics. Again, young Hispanic women, young Black men, really heavy young Black men, also young non-college white women that lean Democratic. I mean, like Rasmussen had it. Probably not going to vote 76-5 for Harris. I mean, that's who that is. So that's their problem. And the idea that they're suddenly going to turn out on election day is a big gamble to make. If you want to bet on Harris, you have to bet on Gallup being wrong, the fundamentals being wrong, the polling trends being wrong, the polling suddenly being biased in favor of Trump at a national level and even a state level, the voter registration data being wrong, the early voting trends being wrong, and a massive surge of Democratic votes just on election day of people who could vote easily for the last 2 weeks and were begged to by people knocking on their doors, people calling them, people delivering ballots to them, and still chose not to, and have been saying for 6 months they ain't going to. And some of whom are not even registered to vote, so they can't vote anyhow. So that's what you're banking on. Could that happen? Yeah, I sign about a 1 in 10, 1 in 8 chance of that, because that's the nature of elections. They're small enough sample, crazy stuff happens. But it sure ain't a more than likely 50-50 chance.
Yeah, well, but that's a really good sum up of it all. Also, again, I mean, I really stress this a lot. Like, by the way, Mark Harris, really smart guy in the state of Pennsylvania. Maybe we should take a look at it, actually. He said it's Trump by 3, and here's why. All right, that's what I believe the data is saying. Here's why. And we should probably read it because Mark is a straight shooter.
You had Trump by 4, right?
No. In Pennsylvania? No, it's Trump by 2.
Trump by 2.
Trump by 2
in Pennsylvania and Michigan?
It's 2, yeah. Well, because it's actually the full ballot is 1. Let me look. Because it changed, from the last time we had it. The head-to-head is Trump plus 2. The full ballot is Trump by 1.6. So, I mean, like a hair difference, So,
you have Pennsylvania and Michigan trending together like usual.
Yeah, and this is another thing I want to talk about. Robert, do you really think this is the year that the 3 vote separately?
Well, that's why I dug in. I dug in. I was like, they keep telling me the industrial Midwest is different. So I dug in. I was like, no, the polling trends is even stronger in the industrial Midwest.
Yeah, but I mean, those 3, right? Like the
voter registration data stronger in the industrial Midwest.
And you know that Wisconsin works with that final registration push at the final week. And by the way, they all vote and they love that law. It's Cahaley and I both did this. We went into the voter file to see about recent voters, right? And like a majority of them have been registered in recent elections in the final week, right? And it's just like, what? Yeah, they love their voter registration in the final week. Depends how long you go back. But like if you look at them, I like 4 cycle averages. Wisconsin, you have to be a little different, obviously. But it was that much of the electorate. They really crank out, man, that last week of voting. And it looks like and I have some of these numbers I could share with people, but it's like in Michigan, and the state hasn't updated. Whoops, I hit the wrong thing. Let me end that. Where is it? Contacts. Yeah, I opened contacts on accident. So the state hasn't updated since Saturday, which kind of sucks because I'm waiting for it. But if we look, where are we? Documents. Where is it? It's in downloads, I guess. If we go to, it should say, where are you? Michigan voter analysis. Where are you? We have a low propensity analysis of who's getting who out. Bottom line is same deal. That it does look like Republicans are doing a better job. Doesn't look like they are doing a better job getting out low to no propensity votes, and Republicans particularly did well during the in-person early vote period. They were doing all right. Like there was a 1.7 million target group of normies, low to no propensities, and it was like, can you get out 300,000? Because if you can, they're cooked. Polls be damned, they're cooked. And as of Saturday, it was like, because it trickled in during mail-in voting, wasn't that much. It was like 20,000, 40,000. Then one night, boom, 100,000, 100, whatever. When election day voting started, then it really ramped up and it ended around 250,000. And we haven't gotten an update yet. So I've been like feverishly looking to see if it ends up more than around 300,000, because if it does, then she's got a problem, because that's Joe Biden's entire margin. And you can't say 100% of them are going to vote Republican, but here's the deal. The way it's set up, it's that, and people on locals know what I'm talking about. You go in, you see your own circle of friends, family, coworkers, whatever, and you shame them into voting. And it's like, yeah, I hear you bitching about gas prices, but you don't vote. Here's your vote record, and it's like, whoa, but that's what you got to do to a Republican or a Republican leaning person. It has to come from somebody you know. A door knocker does it, but not like your friend telling you, hey, man, what's wrong with you? Go vote. So it's almost like this social pressure thing from the ones we know the best. And that's what works on Republicans. And so we know that margin is among these people is going to be a very favorably heavy margin for Trump. And in Wisconsin, we can see that those people, while they wait on numbers, are going out and finding the normies and making sure they take advantage of that Wisconsin voter registration law. So, and by the way, it makes Wisconsin very hard to poll because of that, along with being very rural. By the way, who mentioned that on Twitter the other day? They were totally right. Somebody from Decision Desk, and he was like, this is why I don't care about polling. And, I'm looking at the data and that's it. Wisconsin's particular pain in the ass. And he's right. Robert Haley brought it up a couple of weeks ago too. Like, that's just the way Wisconsin is. It's tough. It's got the biggest miss out of any of those three states. And I got to tell you, I just don't see Pennsylvania going for Trump and Michigan and Wisconsin not. Maybe Michigan, she was to eke out some way. I just don't, man, they vote together. John Kerry was barely ahead in Pennsylvania. He was barely ahead in Michigan. George Bush was up in Wisconsin. Gallup had George Bush up 8 points in Wisconsin. He lost it by a few thousand votes, but he lost it. And Kerry took the Pennsylvania and Kerry took the Michigan. Why, by the way? Because Kerry's got a base that resembles Trump's base right now, and they have always been notoriously difficult to poll. So Kerry's strength with the working class and his ground game beat the averages of polls.
Well,
all right.
And especially Norwegians turned against the Bushes because of the war.
The war, yeah. But they weren't polling badly.
Wisconsin, that's where that trended. But yeah, I mean, I looked into the data. Does the polling data show any different trend from 20 to 2024 amongst the Midwestern states? No. Does voter registration show any particular trend different between them or between them and the rest of the country? No. There's simply no evidence that there's any reason to believe the industrial Midwest will not be Trumpier than the rest of the country. So if you think if you think Harris is not going to win the national vote by 4 or more, she's losing. It's that simple. Yeah. He is underperforming key groups with Biden in the upper Midwest. And the group that they've never been able to get accurately polled, the media and the university polls, are blue-collar older voters in the Midwest. And it's simple. They don't want to be polled. So you got to work like crazy to get them. And you got to know who they are to know that you need to get them in the first place. And they know neither in the media university polls. So, but we should trade this. What is your final national poll?
Oh, it is. Pull it up. Didn't change all that much, to be totally honest with you. Where are that's sorry, I was comparing it to September. I wanted to see how much of these, like, because they were talking late breakers moving to Kamala, and I saw a very tiny late, when there's like the late breakers in the last 2 weeks, and that 2 week late break is always a bigger share of the electorate, and that very late couple of days crowd is very, very small. It's like 2%. Ours was actually less. So I wanted to see when there was still a substantial 8% of late, that were telling us it was undecided in all everywhere in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, nationally. Trump won the lion's share of them. And then Kamala took that tiny little bit. But again, that tiny little bit is filled with a bunch of people who are telling us that I probably won't vote, or I am unlikely to vote. And I'm telling you, I'm not making this mistake again. Oz, I gave him those people because they had 2020 vote history and they did not vote. So I'm not doing it again this year because I'm going to believe them and their vote history is not robust. Bottom line, are you ready? All right. Chase Oliver's getting about a point. West getting about a point. Altogether, third parties have completely collapsed. It is Trump 49, Kamala 48, and that's basically the game. Head to head is 50-50 with Trump with like a hair of an advantage. It is 50.3 to 49.7. So like very rounded to 50-50 with Trump with a 0.6% lead if you give him the rounding. All right. And then also, again, Pennsylvania did not change much at all. They just inched a little bit higher. But again, almost identical to the national. It's going to be Trump 49, Kamala 48, but she's really 48.4. Trump is 49.1. And then the other person is, the other third parties are lumped together as basically a collapse. Michigan does help Harris having third parties on the ballot. We found kind of like the opposite this time, which is weird. And if that doesn't happen, that's where I'm wrong. For the whole election, third parties were helping Harris in Pennsylvania. They were hurting Harris and Biden in Michigan. This flipped on this last round. And it might be, again, caveat. I'm using Nate Cohn's caveat. White Republicans disappeared on us. It disappeared. Florida, Trump by 9. I'm being nice. All right. Trump by 9. And North Carolina, 51.1 to 47.1. 4 points flat. That's it, dude. I mean, you got to trust it and go with it. Not going to bank on a bunch of Democrats who have one cycle of vote history who say they're not going to vote, showing up to vote. Like, I'm just, no. And I don't see this massive Republican crossover with women. It's not there. It's not there. Sorry.
Yeah. And I think the independent vote's going to be even more Trumpy than they estimate, especially because the turnout phenomenon tends to be amplified amongst independents who lean, is my guess. So I'm sticking the same prediction I had back in the summer, 50 to 48, 2%.
Yeah, it could be when all that comes together. Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty close to where Richard's numbers are. I haven't seen, and my turnout estimate's still about 150 million votes. There's been a 20% decline in early vote. So we'll see how much of that is countered by election day vote. But I don't think enough of it on the Democratic side will be to be able to get to a total vote nationwide. I think there'll be some states that might have pretty good turnout, but I think there'll be other states that's really down. So I think it will vary by place. But I think ultimately you get about the same. My prediction is 75 million Trump, 73 million Harris, 2 million or so across third-party independent candidates. For the Senate, we'll put the total over-under at 55 Republican senators. I like them to pick up.
That's bullish.
It is. I like the combination. They're just running. If Trump wins places like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin by 3 or more, or at least by 2 or more, I think he carries over with him at least 2 of the 3 Republican candidates in those states. I think if he wins Nevada by 4 more, which I think is where it's actually headed.
Can I stop you real quick? Because I just got a Clark ballot update. They are trickling. Are you ready? What they netted? Democrats, their net 68 votes.
Holy cow. I mean, I live here in Las Vegas. I mean, I know a lot of the people that fit these demographics, and they've been saying the same thing for a long time. I mean, that they're just not interested in Harris. This has been true for over a year now. That, you know, they don't like the Republican brand, but they're not interested in Harris. So they're just not going to vote. And you can, and I've been a big believer since the time I was in politics running campaigns as a kid, that message matters more than organization. That if you don't have a good message, all the organization in the world ain't getting people to vote for you. That you can knock on their door.
Alex.
You can yell at them, you can scream at them, you can try to guilt them. They're just not getting there.
Yeah, Alex Castellanos used to say you could build a church, folks, but if you don't have Jesus, it's just a
Exactly.
That's
exactly right.
Yeah.
And that's what I think we'll see with Harris. My favorite Senate bets are still Marino in Ohio, who's still trading as much as 50% in some betting markets.
Go get it, because he's about to take the lead by a lot in a poll that's going to come out if it didn't come out already. Go get it. All right.
Yeah,
you heard
exactly.
it from People's Pundit right here. All right. Whoops. Is that insider trading or something? No, this was always going to happen. How much more are we forced to endure these mirages? Because that's what they are. They're mirages. And by the way, that's the Democratic talking point. We need to create mirages, like a mirage that Trump is not up in Iowa, a mirage that the early vote isn't bad, a mirage that Sherrod Brown isn't down to Moreno. And here we are now. Everyone's going to drop their shit showing Moreno ahead because, of course, there is no chance that he's going to lose that Senate race while Trump carries his state by 8 to 12 points. It's not going to happen. Sorry.
And my other favorite Senate bet, long shot, is still Carrie Lake in Arizona. You can get her at 4-1 at a lot of places. I just think it looks right now like Trump is going to win Arizona by 5, 6, 7, maybe 8. So when you're talking about that kind of margin, Data Orbital, one of the more
200,000 ballot lead, Joe Biden won the early vote by 12 points. Okay.
Exactly.
She's
it's just a
in that early vote.
Massive swing. Voter registration's been screaming that for 2 years now in Arizona that change is coming. You look under the hood. Gallego's numbers are very soft. So I think that Lake, all she's got to do is run a little bit close to Trump. I mean, she can run 5 points behind Trump and still win. She can likely run 7 points behind Trump and still win. So go back and look. McSally ran within 2-3 points of Trump when the poll said that wouldn't happen. You look at the polls generally overstate the Democrat Senate in Arizona. So I like that, especially a long shot, 3-1, 4-1, someplace you can get it 5-1. So, I think it should at least be 50-50. And I like the Republicans to hold the House. I think they're going to add seats, not lose seats. So those are my last predictions for 2024.
Let me just tell you too, we did like our partisan lean this time was a little bit heavier. We think this is going to be a more partisan electorate, even though there are more independents in some states like North Carolina. That has been the party trend that this year and earlier in the year, other took over. Actually, it was 23, I think. Other took over as the highest registration numbers. So again, at this point, the lead that he has, it looks like he's actually running even with her in the ECU poll. If that's the case, I mean, he's breaking the, double digits with black voters. He's winning men 2-1. He's only down among women by like 4 points. And their early vote, by the way, looks actually really on the money, very close to ours. It's just like 1 point more Democratic than ours was, which is totally within reason because those others could identify a little bit more, toward one party. So with our national poll, it got a little bit more partisan. We kind of view this as like a 40-40 kind of race, 40-40-30, only not 40-40. It's going to be more like 41-40, right? So that's the way we see it. If it goes anything other than 41-40, if it's like more than R plus 1, then Gallup's going to be right. I mean, really right. So is the Wall Street Journal.
And for people out there want to do cheap math, just take the 2020 margin, make it 7 points more Trumpy, because that's what Gallup is predicting. And there's nothing that separates these states out as being one direction or another that much, other than Florida and Arizona actually appearing to be even more Trumpy than the rest of the country. and you get a margin. And by the way, you can do every single one of those margins are massive 4-1, 5-1 underdog bets on the election markets. So
Yeah.
if you think, Arizona's going to be 6 or more Republican, you can get that at like 3-1. If you think Nevada is going to be 4 more Republican, and again, that would just be consistent with Gallup's swing. Gallup's saying 7-point swing. If you get that level of swing, then Georgia's 6 or 7 points for Trump. North Carolina's 7 or 8 points for Trump. Florida's double digits for Trump. Texas is double digits for Trump. And so that's the way to think of it. If you want to use that as a barometer, and if you think the Gallup number is wrong, how wrong do you think it is? And then
How wrong? Yeah.
Do your assessment. Personally, they haven't been wrong by more than a point in 4 5 straight elections.
It's unbelievable how close they have been. Oops, that's wrong. Let me show it again. There's Good's last minute dump today that's going to probably put Harris up in basically every average by like tens of percentage points. They're going to do that. So that's what it was before we went on the show. I anticipate there will be polls that put Harris maybe up nationally and up in Pennsylvania, maybe, because there's some like wild outlier polls coming out right now. FAU dropped some. There's Marist dropped their final, which is just way outside the consensus. The Atlas polls finals are going to come out at 7. They actually moved more Trumpy from their last to the ones that were released a couple of days ago. Where do you think they're going to have this? Curious.
Well,
Atlas,
I think
those who don't know, were the only ones who were more accurate than me in the national level in 2020. It burned my ass. Everyone who knows me knows it. It was 0.2%. I thought I was going to be right on the money. Man, I was pissed. They got me by 0.2%. So, like, when I see a pollster do that to me, I take notice and I pay. You know what I mean?
The other credit to Atlas is they've been exceptional polling around the world.
Yeah.
I mean, they have had they're one of the best pollsters in the world.
They're very, very good. Yeah.
And the second thing is they have no fear. They really don't worry about public retaliation for where their polling comes down. And that includes certain polls they've done in other countries that there was a lot of pressure not to put that polling outcome out.
Brazil, right? Didn't they say yours in Brazil and they were right?
Multiple places. I mean, and they were against the entire conventional wisdom and the institutional media and sometimes the State Department and some other people. So these guys, I'll give them credit. They have no fear whatsoever. They're like Mark over at the Rasmussen. No worries about blowback. And so you're going to get their honest number. And if that honest number is Trump plus 6 in Nevada, it'll be Trump plus 6 in Nevada.
Yeah.
Now, to be honest with you, again, the Gallup numbers, the early voting numbers, the voter registration numbers, the fundamentals, the demographics, that's what they're all pointing to. They're pointing to that kind of margin on election night. Maybe we don't get it. Maybe it's too hardened. Maybe there's too much Trump hatred. Maybe there's other dynamics in play. That's all possible. But the most probable is that Gallup is right, not that they're wrong. And Atlas is moving in the Gallup direction.
Look, the voter registration trends are big for me too, Robert, because the voter registration trends were good for Trump in 20, but there were 2 states where they weren't because of the demographics, even though there wasn't by party. Georgia, right? And with the inference models showed that Georgia was getting more Democratic, even though it didn't turn into a D+ state. It had gotten more Democratic. And then Arizona for a time being before it got flooded with state-to-state migrants. And that's what happened in Arizona. It was getting more Democratic as the Phoenix area, obviously one of the fastest growing metro areas. That kind of stopped, and state-to-state migration came from California, from New York, from all the other places that are flooding people from to Texas and to Florida, Ohio, even, by the way. But yeah, you have all the Illinois, New York, California. Those are the 3 biggest getters of those state-to-state migrations for those states. And they just Republicans have absolutely surged there. But they didn't before 2020. They fell to R+2. And Joe Biden eked out a win of 12,000 votes. And Georgia was like 12. Georgia was 12. I think Arizona was 14. I have to look. Very, very close. I don't know how that sustains a swing from R+2.5 to R+7, the largest partisan advantage in Arizona Republicans have ever had. Almost double what Trump had when he won it in 2016. Almost double. And he won it by what? 3.5, something, 3.5, something like that. So, I mean, the registration trends are very predictive, even when the polls are not. And the polls are so close that I actually agree with Mark Halperin. either way, and I do think Trump's going to win this election, but I'm just going to say, obviously, if it wasn't clear to all of you, I trust my polling numbers. I don't think it'll be that close in the Electoral College. These states move together, and whoever wins is going to win.
It's the biggest trick if you want the biggest trick in political betting in America, it's bet on correlations. These things are not uncorrelated. Yeah. And if you have it even nationwide, that's a 4.5 point movement from 2020. Yeah. And so what does that make Pennsylvania? It makes Trump +4. What does that make Michigan? Trump +2. What does it make Wisconsin? Trump +4. Yeah. What does it make Arizona? Trump +4. What does it make
sound like a pattern to you?
+5. Yeah. Exactly. And what are you seeing in voter registration? Information that says that's what's going to happen. What are you seeing in early voting? Information that says that's going to happen. Yeah. So so again, is it possible? Yes. I assign it 1 in 6, 1 in 10 possibility that Harris pulls it out. But I don't think it's anywhere near where the betting markets are saying it is. I think it's Trump's election to lose at this point.
Yeah, I couldn't agree. Also, too, Robert, and I'll let you go after this. I know you got to go. I'll play a clip for him before we boogie. I think that there's something to be said for the Reagan-Carter election, where there was a shift to Carter at the end, and it looked like Carter was going to be able to pull it off at the end.
Well, think about if we were here in 1980. In 1980, you would have thought we were insane if we would have said we thought Reagan had a really good shot.
Yeah,
Carter was ahead all year long. On the eve of they did a late debate, Reagan got a bit of a surge, but even after that, Carter was ahead. Carter was +2, +3 going into election night. So if you're here saying, I think polling
Gallup had him. Gallup had Reagan up, but USA Today and CBS News had Carter up.
Correct.
Photo finish.
And ABC, which wasn't publishing its poll, which was doing it privately, had Carter up. And Pat Caddell, who would never get a polling job again after that, mostly Carter's pollster, had Carter consistently up. So there was no chance he was going to lose on election going into election night. And then he lost by 9. 9 votes.
It wasn't even close. Right. It wasn't even close. That's the thing. That's the real kicker there. I guess I'll let you run. Tell people where to find you. And locals, I owe you a lot. I'm working on it, but a lot of people have been busting my balls, and it's taking a lot from me, so I'm working as fast as I can here. But yeah, and the links will be live. Don't forget, Robert, don't forget. And if Robert, you got obviously a free invite. The show's going to be free this year. It's just going to be streaming. So, if you want to come on, you are more than welcome. We're going to start around 6:30 for Kentucky and Indiana, but we'll have those links up. Don't share the New York Times. They're over there on strike. Share People's Pundit Daily, where we're not going to have the needle like we used to. Robert knows they stole the needle from us. The gauge. My needle wasn't automatic with JavaScript. I had to hook it up to a Google Sheet, which was hooked up to high charts, and I had to do it in the Google Sheet and put my equations in the Google Sheet, and the needle would move. And they just pumped a ton of money and said, "We'll take that, thank you." And it's awesome. So people love it. But we will have Senate, House, President maps, and everything else we could possibly get you guys, and that'll be up and available for you tomorrow. All right. But yeah, tell people where to find you, Robert.
Yeah, I'll be posting up later today all of my final picks for the betting markets for those that want to be involved in those, the prediction markets at sportspicks.locals.com. There's a live chat. I'll be in and out of the live chat all day on election day. You can ask any question there. I'll answer it. That was a very productive live chat when we had it in 2020. Because people made a lot of money early on Trump and was able to tell people to get out of the markets as midnight came around, as we saw some warning signs. If we see some warning signs tomorrow, I'll let you know. If we see good signs, we'll let you know that. So either way, you can hop in and out of the chat. And that's the only place I'll be all day with Sports Picks, sportspicks.locals.com. I'll be hopping out in and out of here with Richard on election night.
Cool.
With Viva on election night. I think Mark Robert and them are doing
something. Yeah, we're doing that too. Yeah.
I'll hop in and out of there. Mark Robert and Eric Hunley down in Florida. I think, they probably sold out, but Mark Robert promised free drinks for every swing state that goes Trump. So you get all the alcohol.
Let me get on a plane.
Gobert's ready to start, get a second loan on a mortgage on the house. He might have to really go into some serious debt if things go the way we all want it to go on election night. But we'll see. It'll be eventful either way.
Yeah, I'll tell you, brother. I wish I could get down there with they all. I really do. With them, they would have been a lot of fun. But it's like I need my home base. I need my war room. I need the computers. I need it all. You know, so just can't do it. But all the best, Robert. Thanks again, man. Another great season. All right, I'll talk to you guys soon. All right, that's Robert Barnes, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to play a clip I meant to play for you guys on the way out here. Okay. I think that it is worth you guys listening to, because again, Robert and I are giving you what we think, our opinions about what we think, but this will tell you what obviously both sides think, right? And then you try to find the answer in the middle. The polls are so close. What happens in this situation is usually that it's not. All right. The polls were not really that close, which I tried to argue in 2012, but I was a noob and nobody cared. But if you just took a panel of 5,000 people that were representative of the nation and you asked them to fill out a questionnaire every week and send it back in, it never moved between like a little bit over for Obama, maybe a half a point to upwards of 4 points. You know, not even, I think it was 1.2 to 4. It barely moved. Obama was always ahead. And the point was to try to show people about response bias. And then, we moved on to 16, did the same thing. Typically in an election like this, it's not going to end up being that close. And the way that the voting patterns are right now and the way that the trends and the shifts, it does point to Donald Trump winning this election. All right. Could she win? Of course. But I would rather be Donald Trump. All right. Okay. And I think, by the way, he's, if he gets his vote the way he always gets his vote on election day, it could be pretty bad, but we'll just have to see, All right. So with that in mind, you got to trust your data. All right. Don't forget to show the sponsors below. That's what makes the world go around. They're in the link below. Visit them, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Let me leave it off here with Mark Halpern talking with his buddies, and you guys can listen.
What is the biggest indication that we've seen
that
the
video.
Early vote is a problem for her? It's Jim Messina talking to Jen Psaki. Jim Messina, if you go watch his cable TV appearances, he has been, first for Biden and then for Harris, the most boosterish person about them. Just rose-colored. Everything that's going on with Biden and Harris is fantastic. Here he is with Jen Psaki talking about the early vote. Please play 103.
Okay, what's their biggest concern right now if you're the Harris team?
Well, look, I think it's a couple things. The early vote numbers are a little scary, and you and I have been texting back and forth. Republicans didn't do what they did last time. Last time Trump said don't early vote, and so they didn't. Republicans do have an advantage in early vote numbers. When the early vote come in, it's going to look a little bit different than 2020. And that's scary.
So Dan, decode that for people who aren't familiar with Jim Messina. How scary is it that Jim Messina says it's...
Again, they're texting back and forth and they try to push this off as news. I mean, or like legit commentary. It's not. It's partisan commentary. You go there for hopium or copium, and that's what you get from it. But anyway, Messina is a cheerleader. So for him to say that's unbelievable, a little bit different from 2020. You come on. We're living in a different reality. If you want to spin this any way that's good for Democrats, you have to do what John Ralston did, which is take your reputation and flush it down the toilet. If Ralston was going to say, whatever happens here, I'm going to project it for Harris, I would have had more respect for him if he would have just said that. But instead, he thought they were going to get the Republican lead down to 20 to 25,000. He said, everyone thinks it's going to close. And if it goes below that, she's got a shot. If she's got it somewhere in that range, she's got a shot. But at 30,000 and above, she doesn't have a prayer. Well, guess what? They netted 64 votes, folks. That's it. 64 votes in the last dump or whatever it is. Come on, man. Get out of here. Sorry. Let him run.
Gary.
It's scary. I mean, it's brutal honesty. And, you look at every major urban center in the swing states, and there is not one, not Philadelphia, Milwaukee, Detroit, Atlanta, Las Vegas, Phoenix.
Milwaukee is 44% turnout right now. That's it. Red counties average 70%, roughly.
Democrats are doing well. And the problem is it's two voting blocks. It's Blacks, Latinos, people of color, and young voters. They're not seeing the turnout yet that they feel that they're going to need. So the issue is, can you make it up in the suburbs or with older voters, as you talked about with Ann the other day? But something's got to give. Otherwise, it's hard to see, where the numbers are going to come from.
It's got to give, or it's hard to see where the numbers are going to come from. Don't forget to like the videos if you like them. Share them far and wide. Thanks for watching, folks. I'll see you tomorrow. Pretty much it for us. We're out. Another season. What are the odds? It went by so fast. I'm already going to set the speaker off.